this morning. So to those who are watching on live on stream, welcome to our committee meeting this morning. So with all of that done, oh yes, please, your phones, your mobiles, we're very good at that these days. We don't have them ringing or anything like that, but please, if you could switch them off and put them out of sight, so that means you can be fully present. And I will make sure that we can take a break so that you'll get time to check your messages. I tend to take a break probably around 11 o'clock, depending how we're moving through the agenda, and hopefully that we can have lunch just after 12. Thank you. So, Mrs. Trumper, thank you for saying our karakia this morning for us.
Kia he hereri tātou. Tū taua mai I runga, tū taua mai I raro. Tū taua mai I roto, tū taua mai I waho. Kia tau ai, te mori tū, te mori ora, ki te katawa, homi e, hui e, tāki e.
Thank you, Mrs. Trumper. Are there any apologies, please? I do have one for Councillor Bentley. Oh, thank you, Councillor Donaldson.
Yeah, Her Worship the Mayor is away on council business representing Rotorua.
Thank you. Thank you. So we've had two apologies, Councillor Bentley and Her Worship, who is away on council business. A mover and a seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Thank you, Councillor Wang. That our apologies be accepted. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, thank you, carried. Declarations of interest today. Pao, kia ora. Urgent items that are not on the agenda? Yay, nothing, kia ora. Oh, well, we'll go straight into our presentation this morning. So I'd like to invite the Bay of Plenty Regional Council, the delegation that's here present this morning. Thank you. And this is a presentation on the Bay of Plenty Regional Council, LTP 2021 to 2031. And I'll invite the chairman, Doug Leader, Morena Doug, nice to see you and your councillor colleagues this morning, to introduce everyone and also the presentation. Thank you, Morena.
Morena koutou, everybody. Thank you, Madam Chair. So the format I'd like to follow today is, yes, we have a presentation on our LTP, but I don't intend to dominate the proceedings, and consequently I've got my colleagues here, and in terms of the presentation, most of it will be presented by your constituency councillors, who probably need no introduction to you. So from my left here we have Councillor Stacey Rose from the Tauranga constituency. Mr Thurston needs no introduction to, nor does Mr Winters. Then there's myself, and there's the Deputy Chair, Jane Nees, here, and my colleague Titaru, who also the Okure representative for this area, well known to you as well. So I'll just make some introductory comments, and I'll hand over to Councillor Winters to manage you through the process. And I think we'll probably get the best outcome if we have interaction and questions in terms of what we're endeavouring to do as the Regional Council, because the Regional Council is inevitably in partnership with all our territorial authorities, and in particular this one, in Te Arawa and Rotorua Lakes Council.
Excuse me, Doug, would it be best if we kept the questions until the completion of the presentation?
Yes,
Thank
we'll
you.
try to make the presentation
Thank you,
slick.
councillors. Thank you.
Okay, so in terms of the introduction here, you all appreciate, as you're in this as well as what we are, there's a complex environment we're operating in. We've been through a year of COVID. It hasn't finished yet. There's a significant amount of regulatory reform taking place nationally, and that has impact on both regional councils and TLAs in terms of the changes that are coming around. Huge demands in terms of urban development right throughout the country. There is an enhancement of the partnerships between tangata whenua and a move to more shared decision making. And then there's the climate change issue participating as well. This is our strategic framework, which you've seen before, so I tend to just gloss over that, and we'll get into what, as a regional council, our strategic priorities are. So there's 8 of them that we've put up here. So the big one is regulatory reform. You need no introduction to that. You're currently in the focus in terms of the 3 waters reform, which is probably closer to your heart, but something the regional council's got oversight as well. There's regional recovery, as I said, there's climate change, there's land use and transport. And I was just sharing with Mr Donaldson this morning when we came in from Tauranga. I normally join the queue somewhere closer to the intersection, but this time we joined it at, what was it, Danzies Road? I think so. That was a significant wait in terms of getting to Rotorua, but we did get to the third place, so that was fine. Partnerships with Maori, I've covered that, making best use of our resources across the region. We continue to have debates about sub-regional views and regional views, and that activity in the main is carried out by the chief executive, the respective organisations. Then there's about community participation and constructive relationships as we go forward. So I'll just introduce this one and then I'll hand over to Councillor Winters. So regulatory reform, as I said, across a range of activities, there's significant regulatory reform taking place, whether it's the Three Waters, whether it's the NPS fresh water, whether it's urban, whether it's the RMA reform. All these things are on steroids in terms of the government are of the view they have a mandate to make these changes and they want local government to keep up with them. Regional council, in terms of those issues that I mentioned, are in the forefront of some of those changes and trying to participate with them. There's a focus in our area in particular. Again, no, it's not. It's close to home in terms of the national environmental standards for fresh water and air quality. As you know, there's an air quality standard here in Rotorua, and more latterly there's been one put in place in terms of the air quality in Mount Maunganui. And over the next 10 years, in terms of, on top of our business as usual, there's $28 million we've got on the budget to be spent on freshwater policy over the next 10 years, and that's a significant amount of money. I think it's fair to say that a significant portion of that money will be front-loading it, as opposed to being spread evenly over the next 10 years. And then there's the climate change declaration, which we declared 2 years ago, which continues to get a high focus. And you're all aware of the Climate Change Commission's deliberations, which came out a couple of months ago, which we tend to need to follow the lead on. So for those comments, I'll hand over to Councillor Winters.
And thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this morning. It's a pleasure to be here with my colleagues to bring you the sort of summary of Regional Council's LTP best points. Can I just continue on from the Chair's comments about our freshwater policy? I mean, this is big for us. We've got RMA reforms coming down to us. We've decided as a council that we want to notify our NES policies before the Crown's deadline of 2024. We want it to be in July 2024. This is going to be a big plan change for the entire bay. There's just going to be one right across the bay, and we are committed to getting it right first time because it's going to be a big push from us. In terms of regional recovery, look, we're still recovering when we get out of this, but we're certainly focusing on job creation and boosting economy, transformational change for the region. Can I just touch on that briefly, because one of the things we want to do in terms of transformational change is look towards supporting volunteers a lot better. We've put $500 million in a budget for upskilling and front-loading volunteer sectors that provide pest control, weed control, land care across the region. I think that's a game changer for us because we know our volunteers are stretched, and we want to empower them to do better for us as well. Climate change, Jane, did you want to just touch on that?
Thank you. Great to be here. You'll be aware of our climate emergency declaration in 2019, and we developed a climate change action plan, which is very much about getting our house in order. We've been progressing a lot of work in the space, pulling together all of our business as usual, but also looking at focusing on what is going to be needed in the future. We accept that we need to focus on transformational change, but first of all, we'll focus on those practical, real actions working with our communities and partners. I'll talk more about that later.
All good? Kia ora tātou, everyone. As you know, I chair the Regional Transport Committee, and first off, I'd like to personally acknowledge you, Councillor Donaldson, and Her Worship the Mayor, and also you, Mr. Thomas, for the outstanding contribution you make in terms of transport matters in the Bay of Plenty. And you in particular, Phil, are a very valued member of the Public Transport Committee, and you certainly bring the key issues that are concerning the Rotorua constituency to the fore. So please accept our personal thanks, and also those on behalf of our Chairman of Public Transport, Councillor Von Dadelson, who can't be here today. As you know, we're responsible for rolling out transport in the Bay of Plenty. And as the Chairman said so eloquently, government policy is on steroids, for want of an oft-used expression. And we are continually responding to policies that are coming out of Wellington, and we're particularly governed by the GPS, the Government Policy Statement on Transport, and the other key word which is oft used is multimodal, and effectively that is to get you all out of cars. And in the case of Tauranga, as we all know, Tauranga in the Western Bay is the most car-friendly metropolitan area in Australasia, if not the Southern Hemisphere, we have been told on many, many occasions. So the government wants us all out of cars, they want you on buses, they want you in trains, they want you walking, and they want you on a push bike. So that has been driving a lot of our policies. So I noticed that the car park out in the councillors' area was empty today. You'd all come here by bike, which I fully commend you on. So even if it's wet, yes. So no, we are rolling out public transport, and the big key public document that we've been addressing in recent times is the Regional Land Transport Plan. And I commend all the TLAs in our region for bringing together a cohesive, connected, one single document that has gone off to NZTA, now known as Waka Kotahi. So more on a personal basis that you'll be interested here in Rotorua. As you know, Mr. Thomas pushed long and hard for the review of public transport here in Rotorua. It is no surprise, and it's well documented, that public transport patronage in this town has dropped in excess of 45% and even higher in recent years, and we are determined as a regional council, just as much as you are, to address that. So we're currently rolling out a consultation process that started on the 7th of March, and I urge you all to make a firm contribution. Just a couple of points before I pass back to Councillor Winters. A big push from Her Worship the Mayor as part of the consultation process was the introduction of a Rotorua Inner City Orbiter service. Those of you who were on the Zoom the other day would have been appraised of that. I'm totally committed to it. The form and function is yet to be decided, whether they'll be large buses or mini buses or whatever, but that will really get people moving around our CBD and set our CBD on fire. But other than that, I urge you to make the submissions that are being called upon, and any community groups that you're involved with, be they rural, lakeside, or within the confines of the city. I urge you all to make firm submissions and positive submissions to the Rotorua Public Transport Review. Back to you, Councillor Winters.
Kia ora no tātou. E tuatahi mihana ki a koe, Shirley mō tō tātou kariki I tēnei ata, e pai ana, tō mai. E te tiamana, me ngā memo te kaunihere o ngā roto Rotorua, ngā memo te poari o te hapuri, tātou o te aroa, a tēnā koutou. E ngā kaimahi, Jeff, koutou mā, e mihana ki a koutou hoki. Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Surprised I'm talking about partnerships with Māori. Happy to take that role. As we know, the government's effort and priorities is on making sure that there's an enhanced engagement with Māori. If you were to ask Māori what that means, I mean, we'll always default to the treaty partnership and the expectations of the treaty. So the Regional Council are well aware of that and are trying to, and engaging and stepping up in that space to enhance decision sharing as a starting point, because this is always going to be an effort, a journey in progress. But when you look at the regional settings right now, of course the Māori economy is growing rapidly. The involvement in the PGF funding for Māori is there. There's lots of projects out there. There's also the issue of the Te Manawa Te Wai funding that's out there. So all of these things hallmarking that this partnership with Māori is real, and it's something that the Regional Council is very much setting itself to address. The Committee Māori, which is obviously made up of particularly members of the council, but particularly the Māori constituency members, of which I am one member, are looking to, upgrade, if I can call that, the role and the efforts of the Committee Māori in bringing that Māori voice clearly to the table, and hopefully over the planning phases being involved directly in the decision making. So the council we've got a framework that is looking at issues like Mātauranga Māori, Te Mana o Te Wai, Te Hononga, which is our Māori engagement framework, always looking for ways to improve that. And so I'm very, as a regional councillor, I'm very, very happy that I can say that within this long-term plan, our aspirations to lift the game in that space is real. And so, and I know it's on the books for Rotorua Lakes Council and other TLAs around the Motu as well. It's always easy to put the words on paper. It's always the challenge to implement it in a way that adds value to the community at large. So, Madam Chair, that's really all I have to say, and I'll pass it back to Chairman or Councillor Winters.
Yeah, thank you, Te Taru, and just continuing on, making the best use of resources, we've all got to do that. One of the things I just want to point out here is that we're looking to collect our own rates because we want to be more accountable and transparent to our community. Currently, you're collecting it on our behalf, as are all the TLAs, and we want to see that dividend stream from the port through Quayside highlighted better than what it is at the moment, because often people think, where's our dividend from the port? You'll see it on your rate demand if we start collecting our rates. So we conducted a financial framework with PwC late last year. There was a very comprehensive financial strategy, and we think we've got it pretty well right in terms of where we want to go forward. We've got sub-regional and regional views right across the bay, and that's important for TLAs to have their own voice, but collectively we've got to work together with everybody to make sure we make the bay the best place. We want to see better community participation in everything we do. We want to engage better with our region right across the community. So Jane, your climate change?
Oh, thank you. As part of our planning for our programs in the long-term plan, we developed a climate change position statement, and that's actually in our consultation document in front of you, and we're very keen to get feedback from you on that. So we have a climate change vision, which you can see in front of you, around strengthening the long-term resilience and sustainability of the Bay of Plenty region through climate change action and awareness, and we think there is a lot of potential for incremental change in individuals to help us all address climate change. So in developing that position statement, we identified 3 objectives: that the climate change related impacts are managed and resilience is increased across the region, that organisations and individuals know what they can do to improve long-term resilience and sustainability, and that the Bay of Plenty Regional Council greenhouse gas emissions are reduced. We do recognise that transformational shifts will be required. These are the shifts that we've identified. I won't go through them all. What I would like to say is that we are very keen to work in partnership with you to develop shared strategies, shared targets, shared actions. So very willing and eager to hear your response.
Thank you, Jane. The way we work, look, we have to work better collaboratively across the bay. We all know that. But this one here, in terms of the financial strategy, the big one, where the money is being spent, if you start at the 12 o'clock position, we're going to spend a lot on catchment management, democracy and engagement and planning. In the last couple of weeks, we've highlighted emergency management, be it earthquakes, be it tsunamis, right across the bay. And White Island was another tragedy that just, these come out of the blue, and we've got to be better prepared for them. So emergency management is a key focus for us. We're doing a lot of work in flood protection down at the 6 o'clock Flood protection, we saw the Edgecombe floods, how the effect on that. Resource regulation and monitoring, I mean, that's just the compliance, the consents, and seeing what the Crown is going to throw at us over the next few years. We have support services, and then the big one at the sort of 7 to 12 o'clock is transport and planning, a big public transport push of investments in the next 10 years. Where's it coming from? 21% targeted rates, that's the user pays. General rates, 22%. 29%, as I said, that's our investment income from the Port of Tauranga and through Quayside. That's a big ticket item for us, and we treasure that across the bay, and you know, that's an important funding factor for us. We have operating grants and subsidies, revenue and fees and charges, very small for what we do, but really important. And then we have asset replacement reserves. So, but you can see the dividend from the port highlighted there at 29%. Financial strategy, I think you're doing this, Doug.
Thank you, Kevin. So this is a pillar that the Regional Council holds dear to its heart, and I think the community, on behalf of the Regional Council, will be proud of what's been achieved. So in introducing this, as you know, we have holdings in the Port of Tauranga through Quayside. Quayside is a standalone governance body that holds those shares on behalf of the council, and I'll make some comments later in terms of our aspirations for that. But it gives me utmost pleasure to inform you today that yesterday we made an appointment to Quayside Holdings in terms of replacement, because we have 2 council nominated positions to that, as well as the Chief Executive sits on Quayside Holdings. As a result of a contestable process run by external people, including the Chair of Quayside Holdings, Sir Rob McLeod, I'm pleased to tell you that Titaru White, Councillor Titaru White, is now a Director of Quayside Holdings. So the growth and the aspirations of what we want to do with Quayside Holdings and the financial profile that will sit before it now sits together with the other directors with Titaru. So yeah, a great appointment to take place, and you can look forward to, in some ways, Titaru is now the gamekeeper of the holding. So in terms of, it speaks for itself up there in terms of our financial strategy, but as you know, for those newer councillors, Bay of Plenty Regional Council holds 54.1% of the Port of Tauranga, and that's held by Quayside Holdings as the vehicle. Quayside Holdings also, over the last decade, has grown its wealth from essentially zero to a $380 million portfolio. So you've got port on one side, we call it Quayside Holdings over here as the port number 2. So $380 million, which gives a return, as Kevin said, to the Regional Council and the ratepayers every year. The aspirations and the challenges in front of the directors like Titaru is over the period of this 10-year plan, our expectation is that wealth or that capital fund will be grown from 380 to about $700 million. The Regional Council, I think if you look across a lot of local authorities, over the last, I think when the local government made some amendments back in 1989, a lot of entities received shares, not only in ports but also in electricity companies. A lot of those entities decided they would sell those shares down. This is an example of the stewardship of past governance bodies in the Bay of Plenty here who decided to keep those shares and grow the wealth for the benefit of our shareholders. So that's some of the challenges that we have in front of us in terms of Quayside Holdings. As Kevin said, the population continues to grow, and that figure of $300 for each and every ratepayer across the region is meaningful, given that the population grows or the number of rateable entities grows every year as well. So the challenge for those Quayside directors is to continue to grow that pie so the Regional Council can not only make a contribution to what otherwise would be a rateable tax on the ratepayers, but also engage in activities that we may not be otherwise able to do. So that's the aspirations in terms of the financial strategy. As Kevin said, we've just completed that financial strategy, and it will enable us to, in difficult times, have some reserves that we can utilise. And in the current environment, the Regional Council had no external borrowings, but in the recent times we've utilised the financial profiles that everyone's got available to them to ensure that we are borrowing significant sums of money in the interest of our shareholders to accelerate not only capital projects, but also try to contribute to the dividends that Quayside is delivering to us. I'll hand back to you.
The money, we're looking at a 5.8% rate increase this year, general rate, and then targeted rate of about 8%, dropping down to about 3% in subsequent years. It's about, I think it's just on $16 per household right across the bay. Specifically for Rotorua Lakes, you can see that histogram. Most of it's general rates. We've got urban river schemes. The year action plan that is unique for Rotorua is on a recovery basis. We've got Rotorua Lakes passenger transport targeted rate, bit of civil defence, which is now targeted rate right across the region. And the orange one there, can I just briefly talk about that, regional safety and rescue services? We're looking to introduce a targeted rate right across the bay for volunteer safety and rescue frontline services. This would be the likes of Coast Guard, LANSAR, Land Search and Rescue, Surf Life Saving, and the like, volunteers who are front and centre. We're modelling it on Waikato Regional Council that have a very successful targeted rate at the moment. We've pitched it, and we'll love your comment, we've pitched it at about $4 per household right across the bay, and we'll think we'll have an income of about $400,000 to deliver to those frontline volunteer emergency services. We think that's a good thing, and it's one of our pillars. If you go back to that second slide, we want a safe, vibrant community. And Dave, when you've got all those mountain bikers coming into Rotorua on a regular basis, you know, we want them to be safe. I thought that was an interesting picture of Rangataiki River at Edgecombe, where the flood bank devastated that community. Our infrastructure strategy, we have a lot of river protection scheme assets, and we are replacing, renewing, ongoing on a regular basis to make sure those flood protection schemes are operative and worthwhile. And over the next few years, you're going to see, as Jane said, climate change initiatives that's going to affect right across the bay, not only on the coast, but also in Rotorua. We will have, you know, the hotter, colder, wetter, drier storms coming through, and we need to be prepared for those. In terms of our infrastructure strategy, all those river schemes are up for reviews, and that's just the time frame that we set out. What are we consulting on? Some of the climate change projects that you would like to see us initiate. We're looking at sustainability issues, initiatives. One of the things there is, should the regional council, I mean, we have the hot SWAT loan scheme here in Rotorua for air quality to transfer out old fireplaces. One of the things we're looking at, should we get into that, helping households right across the bay install solar heating insulation in their homes as well. That's up for consultation. We've got a few questions on the public transport bus fare review, and as I said, that regional safety and rescue services fund, that targeted rate for those ones. Consultation, do you want to talk about the regional land? I think we've moved away. We've done that land transport consultation, and fees and charges. We're just looking at a few changes to our fees and charges in terms of big ships coming into our town or Tauranga, and we've just done a review on the rivers and drainage bylaw review, and we're looking to up the fees and charges in that because we really want to protect those assets that hold the rivers at bay, and we've got landowners not knowing that they're doing something wrong, but they could be drilling into the stop bank, which makes it just a weak spot for those. So we're looking to upscale our bylaw fees and charges to make sure we've got those flood protection schemes. to date.
A quick overview there, Madam Chair. So we'll hand back to you.
Thank you very much. Look, thank you. It was an excellent presentation, and it is very much an aspirational LTP plan, so thank you for that. Now, councillors, I certainly with the time for questions, but I would like you to direct your question. I mean, there's the booklet here, which is very good too. I've just had a thumb through that. So put your questions, please. Please be succinct. Limit your questions to 2, and as I said, just really it's around anything that you've heard this morning. So thank you. I'll take Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. Thank you, Doug and the team, for the presentation. My question is in the rating method. So if we look at the regional council rates, whether you're looking at a mansion in Brunswick, a average house in the urban area, or even a house in one of our lower priced suburbs, Fordlands, for example, the regional council rate in total is pretty much in that $400 area. So it's quite flat across properties, and all these targeted rates are a flat rate. So my question is around the general rate, looking at a proposed 5.8% rise, is how's that levied? Is it on land value or capital value? How's that levied?
Yeah, we rate on land value right across the bay, Doug.
Okay, so it'll remain pretty flat.
Yep. Yeah. But because I'm keen for us to collect our own rates, you'll see on the rate demand total cost of rates for regional council, less dividend from Port of Tauranga, because I think that's important. People need to see that everybody's got a vested interest in the port, and here's the dividend. It'll change from year to year. Net cost of rates to regional council.
Good to have that breakdown. Councillor Thomas, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I've got a couple of questions, but first of all, I just want to congratulate you on realising the need to bring forward the public transport review for Rotorua. So thank you very much for doing that, and also the commitments by Regional Council to bring forward implementation of those. Really important for Rotorua to be able to plan for our future. Secondly, you talked about community participation and relationships with RLC, and once again I really want to thank staff who are great at working with the Lakes Community Board. They come out to our meetings, they'll come out to public meetings with us. They do a fantastic job of interacting with us. My questions, they're both around, well, one is around the freshwater policy statement or that you're developing, and you did mention you're looking to one policy across the region, and I just wanted to know where that leaves us with the lakes. Our lakes goals, aspirations have always been higher than what that national policy statement gives. So I'm just looking for assurance that we will continue to work to that higher standard for our lakes. That's my first question. My second question is just around, you mentioned the funding for volunteer groups. And once again, I'm wondering, will that help us do something like bring back the lake wardens we have on the lake, some of those volunteer groups that work with the harbour master, and they've been absent over the last few years, and we are starting to get a lot of issues on our lakes and not enough, the harbour master's stretched too thin. So those are my two questions. Thanks.
Right, thank you, Mr. Thomas. I'll answer the first part. So the NPSFM, which is the freshwater policy statement that was, in terms of the policy, was adopted last year, is the driver behind what Kevin referred to as the regional council has to have these plan changes notified by December 24. This regional council has made the decision that we will go in July 24. Now that's a region-wide plan change. But sitting underneath that region-wide plan change will be some catchment-specific rules that have to be developed on a catchment-by-catchment basis, and relative to the water quality issues in those catchments, there may well be different criteria that apply to those catchments. So an at-risk catchment is likely to have more stringent rules than a catchment where there are no particular water quality issues. Your question in terms of where does Rotorua Lakes, the lakes portfolio here, the whole 14 of them sit, you would have to say in terms of the deed-funded lakes that the criteria that's being applied to those is probably ahead of the NPSFM freshwater changes. So that focus will continue in terms of improving that quality. The non-deed funded lakes, so Lake Tarawera in particular and some of the others around here, will be a focus of attention as we deal with those priority catchments. So I think you can be comfortably assured that the continued focus on Rotorua Lakes will continue. Some of the requirements to reduce nutrient loads and improve the water quality may well be higher than what is in the NPSFM, but that's just the way it is because the focus is on the water quality and essentially the ecological health of the water body. And partnership in terms of Maori will essentially mean that those values of Mataranga Māori now have to be captured as well as what I refer to as the Western science in terms of the attributes looking at waterways.
Thanks for the question, Phil, regarding the harbour wardens and the volunteers. No, not really for the harbour wardens, but let me just take a step back. I mean, COVID-19, one of the unintended consequences of COVID-19 is people are not travelling overseas. Hence, they're buying more toys. They're buying boats, they're buying jet skis, they're buying caravans, they're buying motorhomes. We've seen an incredible increase in activity on our lakes last summer. Something like 30% increase in interactions that the Maritime Patrol team have had with people who have brought a jet ski yesterday and using it today, and they know nothing what they're doing. And it's just, yeah. So in terms of harbour wardens, no, we don't see it being used there. We tend to, once we've seen the results of this year's Maritime Patrol interactions, I think you'll be amazed at the number of interactions we've done on Rotorua Lakes, Whakatane and Tauranga Harbour from the team there. And we'll look at how we upscale those services for Maritime Patrol. But the regional safety and rescue services, no, it won't be for the Maritime Patrol. I mean, that's our core business, is navigation and safety and maritime safety on the water. So I don't see it through that targeted rate at this stage. But good question.
Thank you. I'm going to move ahead with our questions because there are a number of councillors that would like to ask a question. Councillor Yates, then Councillor Kumar.
Kia ora, and through you, Madam Chair, nei rā te mihi kia koutou. Really appreciate being able to get to understand the document more. I have a question based around a contact that was made with me regarding a hot swap that unfortunately had, they were asked to replace their fireplace. Now, the reason why I thought that was because you're consulting on it at the moment. This particular fireplace here in Rotorua was put in 2 months before the law was put into place, and as a direct result of that is now deemed non-compliant. Now this is a pensioner.
Point of order, look, you'll need to be quite, address the things that you've heard this morning, please.
So this was about the hot swap. So I'd like to know and see whether or not the councillors would be able to find out more information about that, because clearly it was deemed a compliant fireplace.
Happy to have that discussion offline.
And we do get presentations from time to time, actually from the Bay of Plenty Regional Council, from the staff. They come over, they inform us, and that I think we'll leave that question because that we do get that information. That's always made available to us.
Yep, it's already diaried.
Thank you.
Coming up on the specific issue of air quality in Rotorua, full update.
Thank you. Yes, we seem to get one on a regular basis, so that will give you most of the answers and to your question or any issues that you have around the hotspots. Thank you. Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through the Chair. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for a wonderful presentation. I see it covers 10 years of the LTP, but I have particularly some concern as to whether or not the light rail was ever investigated for connectivity between Rotorua to Tauranga, Rotorua to Western Bay Plenty, Hamilton and Auckland.
Councillor Kumar, it's an issue that Her Worship continually, with monotonous regularity, brings up at regional transport meetings about the rail network, particularly between here and Auckland. So it is there, it is a subject for discussion, and it is being investigated, I can assure you.
Councillor McPherson, then Councillor Kaifong.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair, and through you, thanks a million. Very interesting document, and first reading, of course, focused on page 29, and the graph there showing the way in which the real increase in rates is going to track, particularly with regard to affordability. To pick up on Councillor Donaldson's question, the significant differences between suburbs is not that great, indicating that these changes are going to be more regressive than progressive in impact. And my second question is, I note that in 2022-23, the percentage of real increase is going to come right down, as it should in a COVID context. The impact this year and next year is going to continue to be substantial on people's capacity to pay. But then I see a spike in 24-25. Is there an explanation for that spike? Thank you.
Morning,
I'll refer
Fiona.
that to our Chief Executive, Reynold.
Tēnā koutou katoa, through you, Madam Chair. Yes, for the first 2 years of the long-term plan, our council has brought forward a number of capital projects, and we're delivering at speed, and that's in relation to the first 2 years. And in year 4, the council is also considering whether to look at a climate change fund, and so this is something the council is considering as out for consultation in regards to how it can move the dial in regards to climate change. A lot of our large increases are related to our capital project, but in the first 2 years, and certainly in that first year, are bringing forward some of those capital projects.
Through you, Chair. Thank you very much, Fiona. Thank you all.
Thank you. Councillor Kaifong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. My question just relates to the regulatory reform and the regional recovery. So it says here that you're likely to have a look at the change in the way that you work, and particularly for us, one of the things that we need to do is to unlock land, and stormwater discharge into the lakes is obviously one. So is that something that we can perhaps see some assistance from the Regional Council with to get things moving a bit more quickly and opening up land areas for development?
So I'll attempt to answer that. The regulatory reform that we refer to is comprehensive across a range of activities. In terms of the three waters, a month ago, the focus areas were potable water and wastewater. It's fair to say now that stormwater is back on the agenda in terms of wanting to make some progress in the currency of this triennium for all TLAs. That in itself will bring some challenges, as your Chief Executive would well know, in terms of being able to deal with those three portfolios: potable water, wastewater and stormwater. The ability of the sector at our level and even at your level, I would suggest, to be able to address those comprehensively and engage with your communities in the historical manner that we have is going to be under challenge. But that's the environment that we face at a local government New Zealand level, not just in terms of our regional council and Rotorua Lakes Council. The government's focus is clearly on housing at the moment, and as recently as last week, there was a local government, central government forum where the Prime Minister put the challenge in front of regional councils in particular and TLAs in terms of how can we make faster progress in terms of housing affordability. Therein lies the challenge for us all in answering your question. You know, it's putting those packages together of addressing the freshwater reforms, the three water reforms, housing affordability, urban development, all those challenges. I don't have an answer for you, but I'd have to say that the challenges, we have probably never seen the scale of them in front of us that we currently see in front of us. And we have to do it collectively.
I think that's the point, is that we need to work together on that. Now, my second question, Madam Chair, is just in relation to geothermal. So obviously, once again, it's that regulatory reform around geothermal consents. And I see that part of your sustainability funding is for solar panels installation, clean heating, and obviously geothermal really should be figuring in there. We've got a resource here. How can we make sure that geothermal's more front of mind?
Yep. Thank you, Sandra. And so the targeted rate that we're looking to utilise for solar panelling, it'll be a cost recovery basis, similar to the hot swap loan that Mercy was talking about. Very small interest charge, but it'll be paid back over 10 years through your rate demand. So it'll be, should we be doing it? First question, should we be helping owners do it? And secondly, it will be on a cost recovery basis. Be it loan or grants, don't know yet, but we're wanting some feedback on that as well. So geothermal is part of that mix. Could we help in that area as well as solar and other sustainable power sources?
Thank you. Mr. Berryman-Kemp, then Ms. Marks.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your presentation. Look, first of all, just before my two questions, I'd like to congratulate you on the allocation of 500k to support Maori participation, particularly within the fresh water space. As per your response for the last question, yes, there's a massive amount of work that needs to be done in that space, and it's good to see some practical support going to ensure that Maori engagement is at the forefront of that. So thank you for that. My first question, actually both of them pertain to the climate part of the LTP. My first question is regarding the public transport plans, and there's a particular focus in the document on bus fares, that sort of thing. Has an assessment been made on the impact on emissions of the various public transport options that you have? And where I'm going to with this, I attended a Zoom meeting with Waikato Regional Council where Dr. Paul Winton presented on the report he did for Auckland Transport, which rather fascinatingly seemed to outline that the plan changes in roading, light rail and buses will only reduce emissions in Auckland by 3%. What will make a massive difference is out of cars and on e-bikes. And of course, you've got a number of options there to support that. So my first question is regarding, has an assessment been made on the emissions impact of the proposed changes within the LTP?
Before I hand over to our CEO, we are totally committed, Mr. Berryman-Kemp, to minimising the emissions that have plagued our country for many, many years, as we know. We are in the process of rolling out electric buses. There are 5 being trialled at the moment in the Western Bay. As we know, they come at some huge cost. And also not only in terms of the initial capital cost of them, as Stavros and other engineers would know, they are incredibly heavy, these vehicles, and they have a major impact on infrastructure, so bridges and the like. So, but no, we are totally committed to it. We've rolled out 5. I know our chairman of Public Transport, Councillor Von Dadelson, is more than enthusiastic about rolling out more, but as I say, they come at a cost, and there are various other issues that are impacting on their rollout. But CEO.
Yes. Thank you, and through you, Chair, that's a very good presentation that you've seen, and the Chair of the Regional Transport Committee also asked all the members of the Regional Transport Committee to see that. It's a 15-minute presentation, it's excellent, and what it does is it looks at all of the different transport interventions and which has the greatest impact on carbon emissions. At the Regional Council, we're looking at something doing similar for the Bay of Plenty as well, because it's critically important to understand on carbon emissions what transport interventions you can do. In regards to the questions in the long-term plan, they have been driven primarily by community requests in terms of fares. There's been a lot of submissions in the past to the council in terms of reducing bus fares. But we're certainly interested in doing something similar to what Auckland did with MR Cagney to get the model you were talking about.
If I could make a comment, also in our public transport program, we're actually looking at a piece of work on behaviour change. How can we help people change their habits? Because that's one of the big challenges that we've got. People in New Zealand love their cars. So there's a number of levers that we've got to move. We need to make sure that our bus services are convenient, that they compete well with the alternatives, that they are seen as a viable alternative for people, but also understand what drives their decisions and how we can help them make different decisions. So that's a piece of work that we'll be doing, I think, in the first year of the 10 years.
Thank you. I do have two further questions, so unless there's something, Councillor...
well, it is good news, Madam Chair.
Is it good news? Then if it's good news...
And we've been sitting here telling you what we're going out to consult on, but I'm going to tell you something that we're not consulting on, which will get you really excited. But as you know, 1 in 5 New Zealanders and 1 in 5 in our region have a disability that impacts on their daily life. And we are not consulting on this. We are going to be rolling out free fares for mobility and severely disabled people in this community in the foreseeable future. So, and can I just say, this council has a very proud record. I could go on for hours, as you know, in terms of supporting disabled people. And I know that Stavros will still have a framed certificate in his office that was presented to this council many years ago by the Disability Networks of New Zealand for the Rotorua District Council at the time, going that extra mile with the wide range of issues and facilities that they brought in for disabled people around public transport. But no, so severely disabled people are going to be travelling free, and that's right across the spectrum. So
thank you, that was good news. Thank you very much. Ms Marks and then Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering, as you just mentioned about disabled people and other things, I just want to clarify, what is your consultation process with rangatahi young people, not specifically rangatahi Māori, but especially rangatahi Māori, as there's only 11 days to include their whakaaro, and a lot of these things in here are going to impact them the most. In this document itself, although it is beautiful, it is quite high level, and for people, again, with disabilities and people who may not yet have a tertiary degree in policy may not be able to participate as effectively as you may wish them to.
Can I introduce you to Councillor Stacey Rose? He's our youngest member on Regional Council, and he keeps us on our toes in terms of consulting with rangatahi young people right across the bay. But Stacey will give you a better answer than I can.
Yeah, in regards to that, Danielle, what we've been doing over the past few months is consulting with rangatahi. So we've run workshops and gone out to high schools throughout the region to actually discuss with them what they want to see in the future of the Bay of Plenty region and within their own sub-regions. We spoke with a group from Rotorua Lakes Trust, I think it was end of January. And that was a group between the ages of 12 and 18. But we are looking in excess of around about 500 rangatahi that we've consulted with over the past month. However, we do want to see that increased, and with the current plans in place, we will be seeing more engagement with rangatahi as we go through. When it comes to the LTP, we have been encouraging rangatahi to get involved with the LTP, and we've started an online campaign asking rangatahi to get involved and actually make a submission to our long-term plan.
And further to that, we've developed a web platform called Hive. Is it, Fiona? Hive. It's a really cool online submission process, and even I can use it, so that's saying something. But social media is big for our consultation this year. We've really upped the game in using social media.
Thank you. Councillor Maxwell, then Councillor Tapsell.
Thank you, and thank you for an excellent presentation this morning. Before my question, I commend the moves that you are wanting to get closer to our communities and engagement, Maori and volunteers. The question I have is, you're going to try some explore different approaches and where you're going to ask the community how you're going to allocate a portion of your budgets or citizen juries. Can you just briefly tell me about that? I think that's a bit innovative.
Getting you the best person for the best answer, Trevor, so we don't fluff it.
Yes, right now staff are looking at where we can get the greatest impact in terms of community participation. In the consultation document, it named a number of examples that other councils are doing around the world. So we're just providing that information back to our council. Council has allocated $500,000 towards bringing in new initiatives. So as part of their deliberations, they'll get a staff recommendation on what is the most effective way to participate with communities, and then they'll allocate that funding. And in the consultation document, and council has considered a number of options to date, but as part of their deliberations, they'll make decisions.
Could I just add, Madam Chair, Trevor, we don't want to overpromise and recall the comments I made earlier. So in terms of the fresh water, and I think it'll equally apply to things like the RMA change, but in freshwater in particular, we had a suite of plan changes that were going to run out to 2030. As a result of the government requirement, those plan changes have to be brought back to December 24. By the very nature of that, pressure on us to do that, I'd suggest that our communication with our communities is going to have to be a lot more focused, probably not as comprehensive as what it has historically been, otherwise we have no show of meeting that time frame. And the expectation from the ministers is that's the date. So there's a challenge for all of us.
And just further to add, Trevor, you'll recall Plan Change 10, which is important for Rotorua Lakes catchment. It's taken 15 years to get that from woe to go. We're trying to do a plan change for the whole bay in 4. And we have to be on our game. Our community has to be well informed. You know, I just look back at Plan Change 10. We've had appeals, we've had Environment Court decisions, we've had High Court decisions, and it just takes too long. And so we're going to have to up our game to get this done in 4 years. Hence, you saw the big push of money that we want to do this in 4.
If I can add to the conversation, Madam Chair, in terms of the Māori space, you heard me mention about enhanced decision-making, presence of Māori. Given the size of the issues coming through and the reduced timeframes, it's very tight. So the issue for us is how do we get to a position of being preemptive in this space in terms of consultation rather than just reactive at the end of it all. That's the challenge. At the moment, we can go out there and we can tick the box on meeting our particular people out there. The question really is how much time do they have to really input with some degree of quality so that we do get this enhanced decision making going on. I think that's the challenge for the regional council in this particular 2 or 3 year time frame, if you like. And we are definitely working on that. We've got excellent staff in the Māori space within regional council, but there is a degree to which they can go. Beyond that, we need to look at how we might be able to fill the gap to make sure that our people are at the preemptive end more than they are at the reactive end. And that probably goes for the community as well, you know, because those time frames are tight and the issues are huge.
Thank you. Thank you. And our final question, Councillor Tapsell.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. Firstly, congratulations to Te Taru for its appointment to Quayside Holdings. And I do want to touch on, you did mention about a potential increase in fees and charges for larger ships. And just from a Rotorua perspective, just a caution that we do rely heavily on trade and tourism of ships coming in and out of there, and we mustn't forget that it is still a very competitive environment about what port these ships want to land at. The question that I have is around the civil defence. Here at the Rotorua Lakes Council, we have the civil defence come out through our general rates, so I'd be quite interested to know what sort of aspects of civil defence will be supplied through the rates that Rotorua residents would pay in the targeted rate. And I thought I'd ask that question because it's a substantial amount, about 30. You had the figure up there. And as we have seen in Rotorua, civil defence is very important, not only with the floods, but also during COVID-19 lockdowns. We also reactivated our Civil Defence Operations Centre to help with our community. So just a question around that. And also, I do want to say, really support the introduction of the Regional Safety and Rescue Services Fund. I think that's absolutely excellent, and thank you for being innovative in how we can support our volunteers.
Yes, so one of the things that happened in the last long-term plan was all of the TLAs and the Regional Council agreed to put in a combined targeted rate regionally for civil defence emergency management. So that's seeking to have one rate for all ratepayers. In addition to that, local councils may also have additional costs, but I really urge you to look at what can be done through that rate, because it's collected on behalf of the TLAs for civil defence emergency management. So I'll follow up with the CEO in terms of what can happen there, because that was what it's designed to do.
Just commenting on your fees and charges for big ships, Tanya, and we're not going to see cruise ships in the port of Tauranga for some time yet, so that charge is minor. It's mainly for Freightliners and all that sort of stuff, but it's a very minor change to our fees and charges in terms of their net operating cost, but yeah.
Thank you, Doug.
Could I thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity, and fellow councillors and Community Board, for the opportunity to present our LTP today. Whilst this might have been a presentation to Rotorua Lakes Council, please feel free to come back to us with any questions. Please submit to the LTP as well. So once again, thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. And I know our CEO has been listening carefully and attentively, so would you like to make any remarks? I'm happy to. Thank you. All right. Look, I want to thank you very much for coming along to speak to us today. What you have highlighted for us is the scale of change that presents itself. And transformational change will not take place unless we're all committed. There's a shared vision that we will all get in behind. I do also want to congratulate you, Tataru, on your appointment to Quayside Holdings. I think it was in 1991 that Quayside was established, and a couple of years later I was actually a councillor. And I remember the cry still in those days, Lyle, you remember, it was sell up, we want the money, we want the money. Well, you know, through our rates now, we are actually benefiting from that discount that years ago the instant gratification could have been taken, and we would not have the advantage of having the credit that we see now coming through on our rates. So congratulations, and I'm sure you'll enjoy that appointment. So thank you very much, Doug, and for your colleagues for coming over this morning. Kia ora. Councillors, we'll just take a 5-minute break while we say farewell to our visitors and rearrange a few things. Thank you.
future challenges. And since 2017 and 18, we have made some significant progress in many of these areas. It may appear to be a long time ago, but really in the life of infrastructure that's got a horizon of at least 100 years, a couple of years, 2 or 3 years is not really a huge space, but we've made some significant progress, and I think it's important to remind ourselves of that. We have, for example, in the water supply, completed our master plan, so we know in terms of our special plan, what do we need to develop in terms of sourcing water, storing water, distributing water, and protecting water for the long-term aspirations of our growth plan. We do have identified and implementing an aggressive demand management plan to minimize the amount of unaccounted for water. We have identified that there's a risk to the quality of our water from sources and properties that generate substances that, if they allow to get flow into the system, they may cause community health risks. And we have implemented a backflow prevention policy, which you have agreed about 18 months ago, and now it's in full phase of implementation. And also, for the first time in about 2 years ago, we have managed to tick all the boxes and meet all the drinking water quality standards for all our sources of supply. Now, I don't think we should be taken lightly that, because in recent times, as we explore the Three Waters reforms, the request for information undertaken by the Department of Internal Affairs and the water industry sector, our group, on behalf of the government, to set up the platform for the reforms, identified that only about 13% of the water suppliers meet drinking water standards. So we are one of those 15%. Wastewater. Some significant projects that have been on the go. We have completed about 3/4 of physical implementation of the Rotorua sewage scheme. We still have to complete the Rotorua on-site pretreatment system. There are some significant challenges still in that area, and we will be talking to the council in the next few days about some challenges and opportunities and approaches to that perspective. But nevertheless, that is a long historical project that's been ongoing for the last 10, 11 years, I think. And now we are about 3/4, of that, to the end of that road. We have completed again our wastewater master plan, and that is aligned with our future growth. We have also identified as part of risk mitigation, and you have agreed into a performance-specified operations and maintenance contract for wastewater services, what we call trilogy contracts, to minimize the risk to the community and to this council in terms of financial exposure for operating an older system and a system that requires constant attention on its critical parts. Also, we have progressed in a sustainable wastewater treatment and disposal alternative, with iwi stakeholders. As you recall, we had some challenges about upgrading our wastewater treatment plant in the city in terms of the discharge point. And as you are aware, we have reached now a point where we have a broad level of agreement with our iwi partners as to what's the future direction for that, activity. Stormwater, again, we spoke about it in the past, and as you're aware, and you heard the chair of the Bay of Plenty Regional Council earlier saying that we collectively have some significant challenges, but nevertheless, in promoting our special plan and our growth master plan, we have identified in our master plan for stormwater. We have secured some external funding, and we are well on the way of designing the feasibility and geotechnics at the moment to give effect to that master plan gradually over the next 3 to 10 years. So we have identified that without the provision of the security and the safety of a stormwater master plan, it'd be very difficult to ensure that we can secure our resource consent to enable land development and the housing aspirations we have. In transport areas, as you recall, we have worked consistently with our partner agencies and NZTA And we are paying a lot of attention into our state highway corridors. At the moment, we've got somewhere in the region of $100 million of investment in progress. And I do appreciate and understand that a lot of people find that impact of the ongoing works irritating sometimes. But the reality is that those works are necessary to safeguard and protect our future capacity. We have implemented a significant amount of speed and safety reviews across the district, in terms of creating shear paths. 30 kilometers of that are in place at the moment, and we're seeing some significant mode shift, benefits. School kids riding or walking to school, in many areas indicates almost we have 180 to 190% mode shift, shifting and utilization. We have agreed with NZTA a network operations framework and a mode shift plan. These are important documents and aspirations that help us to secure ongoing funding from NZTA. In a snapshot, this is our infrastructure assets in summary, so you can understand that in all these areas we've got significant assets. I won't go through them and read them by one, but I think the intent of this presentation here is to highlight that on the surface or under the surface, you are the owners of infrastructure assets that have been built, installed, maintained over many generations, and these form the backbone of the fundamental services provided to the community. Again, at the current state of the assets, we are responsible as a professional group within this organization to continuously to evaluate how our water supplies, our wastewater supplies and stormwater supplies respond and behave into a changing regulatory environment and changing demands. And a changing set of expectations, and also within some challenging economic circumstances. You see that most of the times the general picture is that we do have some aging pipelines network and aging infrastructure. However, we have developed and have implemented either via our traditional contracts or through the implementation of the new contracts for like the wastewater system, risk mitigation actions which pays attention to our critical parts of our network and minimizes the risk of a catastrophic failure. The only area which is highlighted in red is that in terms of our stormwater, we had 2 years ago in April 2018 a significant flood event that caused a significant disruption and risk to our Nogodaha community. But again, together with the Regional Council over the last couple of years, we have identified the reasons, the causes, and we have now arrived at a point where we're implementing a significant risk minimization plan for that particular area. Again, the infrastructure, as a summary in terms of finances there, you would see at the bottom there, what you do own assets that are worth about $1.4 billion. The depreciated, the next column there indicates that the depreciated replacement cost is about $823 million, which will explain in the next picture there, these tables, which when you see on the under the column which says percentage of design life expended, the percentages basically indicates that when you start a brand new assets, and brand new assets is 100% unconsumed. As you go through its life, a portion of it gets consumed every year, a portion of its design life. You can see there that a significant portion of our assets has been consumed. On an average, probably we're about 40 to 50% into the consumption of that asset, which again, every time you go into an aging assets, we are required to implement reactive, proactive, and I suppose optimization techniques and methodologies to make sure that we do not allow the network or the services those networks provide to fail. And that is why we spend a lot of our time optimizing the way contract works, optimizing the way we intervene, identifying new methodologies of implementing maintenance works, and operating our renewal programs in a way that addresses the most critical parts of the network to make sure that we are in a good we are all in a good position to meet our community's needs. I think it's too small printing, God. I think that the important thing here to highlight for you is in the area of what are our strategic sort of challenges, the issues that are impacting to our community and ourselves. And obviously, number one is an ongoing effort to maintain assets in a stable and reliable, safe condition. And again, we operate that on the basis of risk evaluation. It's a matter of identifying for each portion of the asset what are the consequences of a failure, what is the highest risk, and we prioritize that against other elements. We also try to identify what are future demands for infrastructure, and we're developing our master plans, which basically picks up on our current state and capacity of infrastructure and develops it in a way that would meet our aspirations for growth. We have emerging legislative and policy changes, which we need to be constantly on the alert for that. It's not a matter of choosing to comply with that or not. It's a matter of how we're going to comply with it. And therefore, our approaches in terms of ensuring aspects such as discharges into the environment, emissions, water quality, stormwater standards, flood protection standards are all part and parcel of statutory requirements, and do we need to continuously incorporate those issues into our master planning. Obviously, embedding cultural values in the management and delivery of infrastructure services is a critical component to give effect to our partnering approach with iwi, especially in Rotorua. This organization operates on the basis of bicultural DNA, and I think sort of the operations and installation, the maintenance and the management of infrastructure has to be consistent with our Maori principles. And sometimes those things may cost us a little bit of time, may cost us some extra money, but at the end of the day are incorporated into our overarching operational principles. Climate change, environmental sustainability are important subjects. Many of you probably get approached by land development agencies or land developers, and sometimes they raise concerns about the way we impose or require comprehensive stormwater management plans. However, climate change modeling and calculations undertaken by agencies like NIWA and the government risk management in terms of emergency management continuously update these models. And when we calculate capacities and conveyance and storage requirements, we really need to demonstrate very clearly how we comply with it. And we don't do it because it's a statutory legislation, we do it because there is a flow-on effect. If we don't do it properly, we're putting at risk current and future ratepayers and the future economic prosperity of the districts. Therefore, understanding those models and the implications of climate change and its impacts are critical points in developing our master planning for our infrastructure going forward. And the resilience of critical infrastructure, again this morning we had a minor earthquake. It could have been a little bit less minor. The important thing is that in designing infrastructure, we as engineers, as a group, we're asking ourselves, if a disruption occurs because of a natural event, do we have an alternative? Can we switch one line of supply and go to another line of supply? Do we have enough resiliency in our key infrastructure? Are our other materials we use of the nature that withstand lateral and horizontal movements? Those things are embedded into our infrastructure planning all the time, and obviously making sure that we have the appropriate resilient materials and designs in our infrastructure are important components. And of course, maintaining knowledge and capability, our people resilience is paramount. We are closely involved with the Department of Internal Affairs and the government propose 3 waters reforms at the moment. And the picture that emerges at the national level is that the skills and competencies in engineering and infrastructure, especially municipal infrastructure, installation, maintenance and management across the country are really scarce. Most of our engineering expertise are approaching to an age where it's past their I wouldn't say useful date, best useful date. They're approaching the end of their professional career, and obviously it is always going to be a challenge. Is now and will continue to be a challenge to attract and maintain the right kind of skills and personnel to help us move forward. So all these are challenges that are impacting onto our infrastructure service delivery. And again, specifically, we take some of the water supply services, for example. Their focus will be in strengthening infrastructure and resiliency. We have an actual asset condition to ensure that we have actual asset condition information. Historically, we have addressed the future needs for renewals on the basis of the extrapolated design life of assets. Incrementally, because we operate into a constrained fiscal environment, we need to make sure that our interventions are targeted on the basis of actual condition information instead of assumed life expectancies. And obviously, we do have sources of water in Rotorua. We are fortunate that because of our proximity to the sources of underground aquifers and our relationship with iwi, we have access to very high quality spring waters. We're meeting our drinking water standards, but obviously, increasingly, we will be required to secure and maintain our current resource consents for taking water. And therefore, having exemplary and meaningful and truthful relationships with iwi, it will help us maintaining that access to good quality water. But if we don't, we also need to have alternatives. We need to ask ourselves what will happen if we don't, and we're developing alternatives for that. We're not short of water in Rotorua. However, to develop water, treat it, and convey it is always going to cost money. And again, we have to address that. We've developed our master planning. We have we also addressing the Three Waters reform by with the governments, and obviously we need to be active participants into those areas to make sure that things are not done to us, but things are done with us, and we respond appropriately to those kind of challenges. Wastewater, again, our focus is in terms of managing our resilience, identifying asset condition as a marker, as a trigger for intervention, and obviously to make sure that we provide for our future growth. Three Waters reform will pose a challenge again, because in progressing those reforms concurrently, people like ourselves, we have to work on those reforms, but also have to deliver business as usual. And those reforms soak up and take a lot of our resources and a lot of our time, because we need to interact, we need to provide information, we need to disseminate and digest information coming from the government. And so this is on top of our business as usual platforms. And again, we've got the implications of Bay of Plenty Regional Council's Plan Change 10. As we grow, we have to ensure that our nutrient targets are achieved in terms of what we receive, treat, and discharge into our receiving environment. And again, we've got a whole range of mitigation plans into that, and that's what our master planning and asset management plans anticipate. Stormwater, again, we've talked about it in the past. It's all about managing current risks, but also the risk of future growth and development in a constrained environment. Again, I would like to remind elected members that most of our growth will come from development of land in the periphery of our current urban zone. So stormwater will be generated in that periphery and will be conveyed through existing urban land to be discharged into the lake. So therefore, the challenge we have is to make sure that we do have our appropriate storage and attenuation and management of those flows, so we don't create unnecessary risks for our urban population, and obviously environmental and other sort of pollution risks. And again, we pay a lot of attention into making sure that we have an ability to meet the national policy statement for fresh water, the prevention of significant flooding in urban areas, and obviously pay attention to the Three Waters reform and collaborate with the government to that effect. Transport is the same. We do have a limited capacity to create new roads. Sometimes, we do have interruptions to corridors, but again, a lot of our activities, a lot of our roading infrastructure sits on not very stable ground because we are in a caldera environment. Most of the ground that underpins our roads have been created by historical eruptions, of that area. You've got the geothermal activity that is undermining the structural foundations, of our roads. We've got over 1,000 kilometers of roads that founded on what we call road foundations. And the road foundations are greatly affected by ground movement, by increasing climate change, stormwater effects, by geothermal activity that melts and impacts on the cohesiveness of the soil, and therefore a constant waterproofing of the road and identifying areas of criticality to manage the ways we can mitigate this kind of risks is a significant effort in our transport, transport activity. Again, community expectations, are always going to be prevailing, that people expect to get from point A to point B with minimal interruptions. Again, you see works happening on Tinai Road, and every day I get numerous complaints and problems about it. Took me 30 minutes to get to where I want to go. So the tolerance of the community in terms of disruption is diminishing. Because every change is always going to be dramatic for the individual. But there's of course issues of affordability, we've got changing demands. We need to provide corridors and space for alternative modes. As the regional council identified, a significant portion of population, I'm not quite sure whether 1 in 5 suffers some kind of disability here, but it is a significant portion. But a lot of people moving on with disability vehicles, with scooters, they're not easy to navigate challenging road corridors. So the demand is that we need to create safe, accessible, and effective corridors for the children, for people who want to cycle, who want to walk, and people with disabilities. So this change in demand is always going to be there and will continue to increase. And of course, we have increasing cost of regulations. I've been over 30 years in this environment, and I remember when I first started, we had a truck going around with some asphalt on the tray, and potholes were identified. Some would throw a shovel full of asphalt into it, and some would stamp on it and throw maybe a bit of small roller and get it done with. These days, to fix a pothole, probably you need $2,000 worth of traffic management measures. So the cost of pothole material may be about $15, and you spend $2,000 to create a temporary traffic management measure around it to make sure it is safe to do that. And I would not bemoaning that because it's very important. Unfortunately, you see around us significant accidents that take the lives of workers on the roads, but nevertheless, these are additional costs that come into our roading activity. And again, this is the big sort of our shopping list for the next 30 years is a big numbers. You will see for the next 30 years, you will invest somewhere in the region of $4 billion, into your infrastructure activities. Yes, these numbers are inflated to the best of our ability, as we know them at the moment, but these are a significant chunk of our of the investment that these communities or any community will do going forward in the future. Those numbers there are embedded into our financial strategy, which goes for the next 10 years. How our infrastructure strategies got a 30-year horizon. And again, these are just that's just a reminder that to maintain that $1.4 billion worth of infrastructure is not cost-free. We need to continue to invest to maintain, optimize, renew it, and upgrade it, as we go forward with it. And again, it's just a graphical presentation that for the next 10 years, you've got a relatively, not very flat. It's still moving from $60 million, roughly to about $80 million in the next 10 years. But then you could see a sharp uptick for the next 20 years. And again, just to remind us that the finance to support that kind of infrastructure are significant. So I think in a nutshell, over the next 30 years, it's expected that our planned expenditure on renewals across all infrastructure activities will be maintained and adjusted to asset lives. I think I've said that before when we were doing the Trinity wastewater network. And again, I'll reiterate it here for all of us, that we do have an aging network. Almost 40 to 50% of our assets have been consumed. We cannot replace them or renew them all in one go, and therefore we focus attention onto the critical parts of the assets. Our treatment plants, our pump stations, the rising mains, pressure mains, water sources, and so on. And therefore, we're planning our renewal process on the basis that these assets will be our primary renewal targets. However, it is possible, and I would say we're realistic to expect that sometimes the non-critical assets might fail earlier than we anticipate, and therefore we need to continuously review and reassess investment in renewals. Capital expenditure on the levels of service and improvements is focused on strengthening infrastructure resilience for the core infrastructure. The Rotorua wastewater treatment plant, now we're going to start getting a bridging consent, and very soon we'll be applying for the upgrade consent over the next 6 to 8 months. And then we engage into a contract to upgrade the treatment plant. So a significant expenditure over the next short term. For growth, again, we have a capital expenditure to accommodate growth, and it is focused on installing bulk infrastructure to service future growth and infill areas and to support homes and thriving community strategic framework. And again, our regular resealing of our roads, it's cyclical, repetitive, and to some degree annoying event by many people. But it is a bit like resealing, it's a bit like continuously painting your house. Don't paint your house, you lose your house. We don't reseal our roads, we lose our roads. And I think so resealing is something that will continue to be part and parcel of all our activities in the transport areas. I wanted to make one final point. Again, go back to my second objective, to give you comfort and confidence that we do have a good diagnostic understanding of where we are now. We understand our vulnerabilities, we understand our challenges, and we have developed mitigation actions to all of that. One of the good things that has arisen from the Department of Internal Affairs 3 water reforms and the conversations I'm having with the local government, New Zealand government, and also recent conversations I had with WICS, which is basically the Water Industry Commission for Scotland, which they evaluated all our approaches to three waters, have clearly identified that we do have the same challenges or similar challenges that many other metro cities, metro parts of this country and provincial cities have. However, our performance and our KPIs are in much better condition than those areas. We do have challenges, but you don't not see catastrophic imminent failures. You don't see failure to meet quality standards. You don't see failure to meet resource consent conditions into all discharges. You do not see our assets being in a critical phase where they can collapse. And I will suggest to you, councillors, that the reason for that is that you are able to, and you have in your wisdom, agreed at least 3 years ago to invest systematically into appropriate maintenance and the renewal regime and cycle that maintains those assets in a stable condition. I cannot be extremely cute and say to you there will be no failures. There will be failures from time to time. But to the best of our ability and to the best of our knowledge as we understand our networks at the moment, that infrastructure plan you have in front of you will give you the necessary comfort and confidence that you are investing at an appropriate level. And if we need to modify it in going forward, I would like to believe that we will have the confidence and the comfort to come back to you and explain why we need to uptick some investment for the reasons. And I'm pretty sure you as elected members, you'll be able to respond appropriately to that. So thank you. Take questions if you want.
Thank you very much, Stavros, for outlining that plan, the infrastructure strategy. for the next 30 years. And it should give us comfort. And I do know, particularly since you've been on board, that you have constantly asked us to look into the future. And that is a reflection of the plan that you've put before us today. So thank you for that. And the other thing that I think is we've had that plan from the Bay of Plenty Regional Council this morning, or their overview, and it's just, you just hear, if they don't get the settings right, that will impact on us as well. So the opportunity for us to work together, it's so very important. So I want to thank you for the presentation this morning. So I'm going to take questions now. Councillor Donaldson and Ms Marks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, Stavros. Thank you. And Madam Chair, can I signal I'm happy to move part 2 for the strategy to go for inclusion in the long-term plan. Stavros, I just wanted to talk to the discussion on page 15 and 16 on the significant issues that you've identified, and acknowledge point 4 there, that embedding cultural considerations into infrastructure planning can come at a cost, but also it comes at significant cost, both in time and process costs if they're not included up front. So my question is, moving down to point 7 and maintaining council institution knowledge, in terms of the technical staff understanding those likely costs in forecasting the cost of investment in infrastructure. Do you see the need to invest in staff skills and development and training should include an element of understanding those cultural considerations when they're forecasting the technical costs of significant pieces of infrastructure?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think sort of it's a very pertinent question for 2 reasons for that. I think historically, when we were identifying the future replacement or infrastructure, and that was, it wasn't unknown really, but it was also a brought to light by the Department of Internal Affairs investigation recently in my conversation I had with a water commissioner in Scotland last week. We as engineers, we identified the renewal of assets, the cost of renewal of assets or upgrading of assets on the basis of financial replacement. The European model and the international community is looking at the moment into what they call economic replacements and taking factors into known and emerging regulations and what the environmental conditions will be in the future and cultural conditions or aspirations of the community. And obviously for our setting in Rotorua and in New Zealand, we are guided by the treaty, obligations we've got. But Rotorua is a unique, environment too, and this council has adopted, those aspirations. We are moving into a situation where cultural expectations and aspirations are legitimate inputs into these replacement or upgrading costs. Yes, we need to continue to upgrade and understand our knowledge and understanding of the Te Ao Maori issues. That my chief executive's position and I suppose the executive team's approach is that we're creating at the moment some capability inside the organization where we don't really have what we call Maori ambassadors. Every one of us has to understand that, and we have some way to go, and obviously, but it's not because of lack of willingness or desire to do that. It will take us some time and actually incorporate these elements into all our details of our activity, and yes, we'll continue to do that.
Thank you. Ms Marks?
Kia ora. Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just having a bit of a conversation to clarify whether my question should be asked. But I will ask it anyway. For the water supply, has there been any conversation with Hapu, namely Ngāti Kiaro and Ngāti Tuara, about a review of the agreement that allows the city to acquire water from the water sources in regards to it being better suited from their point of view? But they can speak to that. And part 2, not part 2, a second question will be, will the infrastructure for cycleways be protected? Just namely thinking about how the Randolph Street is quite a very heavy traffic, car dense place, will there be just a protected cycleways, especially when we're talking about climate change mitigation and making sure that people feel safe to bike on our roads? Those are my two parts.
Perhaps the first question, if I might ask Gina to respond to the first one. Thank you. I don't know if you heard that, did you, Gina?
Yes, I did. Thank you, Madam Chair. In respect of so most of the water in the urban, Rotorua urban area comes from a spring known as Karamutakina. I would not describe that as an agreement to take water. As the council heard, I think in 2019, that was effectively a compulsory taking. And Ngāti Kiaro, Ngāti Tuara have consistently through the years raised with council their deep concern and unhappiness with both the way in which the land was taken and the impact on the spring and the utuhina of the water take. We have been in discussions with Te Runanga o Ngāti Kiaro Tuara and the Paiaka Lands Trust, from whom the land was taken originally. Those conversations are still going on, and I think there's considerable pressure on us to resolve those as quickly as we can.
Thank you. Yes, I remember that when that last conversation was held here in council. Thank you.
The second element of the question, Madam Chair, is not just about cycleways. I think most of our corridors need to be maintained in a regime that is responsive to and reflective of changing circumstances. And the answer is that yes, we'll do everything we can. And again, I'll go back to my initial question. My initial proposition is that we need to meet a whole range of expectations, and also need to meet them inside an affordable and reasonable fiscal envelope too. So it's find the right balance there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Berryman-Kemp, and then Councillor Tapsell.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And look, first of all, thank you for a comprehensive assessment of our infrastructure requirements. And certainly, just to talk with Councillor Donaldson's point, particularly like strategic issue 4, interesting to consider, in terms of incorporating cultural values into decision making. I guess there's two approaches with that. One is to do it with, and one is to do it for. And obviously the preference would be to do it with, but that includes governance, operational management, and implementation as well. But my question, and I had a whole pile, but I think it boils down to, does the strategy have the flexibility to adapt to a rapidly changing environment, given it's a 30-year infrastructure strategy? But off the top of my head, climate, freshwater reforms, water entity ownership potential under 3 waters, new technology, culturally appropriate approaches, urban design, decreased road vehicle use if we achieve what we need to under climate changes. Do you think that, I guess the tricky question that I'm asking is, I certainly see the need for a 30-year infrastructure plan, and I understand that these assets have a long life, a long planning, and they work through. But do you think there's sufficient flexibility within the strategy to adapt and change? Because within a year or so, whether the council owns the assets or not is still to be determined. What our climate requirements and freshwater requirements may have changed.
Thank you, Eugene. The short answer is, in my mind, is that infrastructure is not a purpose outcome. Infrastructure is a derived outcome. You have an infrastructure, whether it's 3 waters or roads or whatever, in order to serve your community. As the circumstances that impact your community change, either through legislation, other considerations, climate change, and so on, or ownership and operation, for that matter, then the infrastructure approach you take needs to remain on target. Can we continue to serve the initial purpose of infrastructure, to serve the community? And I believe that what we are outlining here in terms of identifying our focus is not about, you notice that infrastructure does not say, I will replace 1.4% of the pipe network or 3% of XYZ. The financials translate to that. But the outcomes we're seeking here is environmental betterment, resiliency, reliability of supply, stability of services, safety of services. These are outcomes, and they're designed to meet community needs. Now, I think the strategy is flexible. We need to continuously asking ourselves, regardless of who, how, and where we deliver this, this managing these assets, are we achieving these key outcomes? Are we serving the community needs? And I think that we need to continue to do that. Yeah, things will change. From year to year will change. But I don't think the fundamental expectations that a person who uses water should feel that the water is safe, should feel the water has got a reliable water supply, should feel that they are not at the risk of get flooded, should feeling that their wastewater is managed effectively, it doesn't endanger their health. It won't change. It's just a matter of how you're doing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tetzel, and I'm hoping that this session will finish by 11:30. Thank you. Councillor Tetzel.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, I'll be brief. Thank you, Stavros, Greg and Regan. The question I have really originates from when I think about what the future will look like for local families here. Yes, we absolutely need quality infrastructure, but we also need it to be affordable. So when I look on page 14 and wastewater at an operating estimate of $1 billion over the next 30 years, it leads me to start thinking I'm very happy with what you've got for our 30-year infrastructure plan, but the question really is, how are we going to do that? And I know that energy and electricity is increasingly becoming a big cost, so I'm just wondering if in your assumptions and my questions around the strategic challenge of meeting future demands on infrastructure, one of your sections in this report, and my question is on how we're considering that operating cost, and are we considering innovative ways of not only creating but recapturing energy and using that in a sustainable way? And I ask this because in 30 years we could be operating in a very different way, and I don't believe in 30 years we should be relying on fossil fuels. So when our wastewater treatment plant sits on top of one of the most active and largest geothermal fields that we have in this region, why are we not considering re-injecting that and reusing it so that we can save money on electricity and ultimately lead a more sustainable and hopefully a circular economy here in Rotorua?
I think the observations, Councillor Otapsel, are very valid. I think sort of there's other opportunities there too. When you think about it, we'll be generating somewhere in the region between 20 and 30,000 cubic meters of treated wastewater every day. And the challenge is being put to our operators to identify ways of, can we use that water to generate electricity? If you can generate that, create hydroelectric energy creation. Question is that what are the capital investment requirements at this point in time versus the projected needs? But at some point in time, there will be a balance between discharging highly treated water versus using it to generate electricity, and also to use it to substitute irrigation, for where you use potable water. All these kind of things have to be part and parcel of our considerations. Thank you.
Mr. Thomas and then Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And look, I've got two very short questions and one slightly more complicated one. My first one is just around the impacts of possible regionalisation of management of the three waters. And are you concerned, in Rotorua here over the last 8 years in particular, as has been mentioned, we've developed new ways of engaging and working alongside iwi on our infrastructure projects. They do take longer, but they're incredibly worthwhile and we get a better result coming out of them. Are you concerned that if we go to a regional body managing these infrastructures, that we will lose that Rotorua way of engaging? And I guess my second thing around that is, you mentioned that we are doing very well in terms of performance on managing our infrastructure. Is that likely to mean that we will fall down the list of priorities in a region, when it's a regional or larger organisation? That's my first question.
I think that's going to actually be it, because I did ask that we move through these questions, and so I've got another 2 councillors to speak.
Okay.
So if you've got another question, it'll be one or the other.
Okay, yep. Shall I ask it now, or let me answer this one first? Yep, ask it now.
Thank you.
Okay. It's just, Councillor Tapsell mentioned that graph of capital expenditure and operational expenditure, and we've got $1 billion on wastewater and about 400 million capital expenditure. I was a little confused about what the difference between growth and levels of service are, and also given that, if we're looking at somewhere like Tarawera Sewage Scheme, you can see it's a very small percentage of cost of what we're spending overall on wastewater. So should we be looking at a more liberal or generous way of looking at sharing that cost rather than targeting it all on one small community?
Madam Chair, can I think the second part of the question is subject to Council's funding and revenue policies, and I would leave it on the table. I hear what Bill says. In terms of the potential of moving to some kind of regional entity with 3 waters reforms, I think we propose to have a workshop with elected members in the near future, before your workshop with the Department of Internal Affairs anyway, so we can canvass these kind of options and risks, and an approach we will take onto that. I think there are certain elements that, you asked your question, so what? Okay? There are certain elements that, it's worth dying in the ditch for it. So we need to work collectively to identify what are these elements that we could die in the ditch for it. So, but we will need to workshop that activity. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kumar, then Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you very much. With respect to time constraints, I'll go straight to what I think. I'm pretty happy with your report and the fact that you've got a 30-year plan for the city that should bring quite a relief. I know nobody's got a crystal ball, but that 30-year plan tells that there are factors that will mitigate risks and look at opportunities. I mean, if Mother Nature decides that hell, high water and storm will come our way, then only what we've got in structure in place will help us. So thank you very much for that. It's almost like going shopping. You have a plan, you have a budget, but sometimes you sort of go out of your way when you see things differently, or then you can't. So thank you very much, Stavros.
Thank you. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. Thank you very much, gentlemen, and Stavros in particular. For me, this was enormously important with regard to conceptual clarity. The issues have been teased out beautifully. Under strategic issues, I assume the 7 strategic issues are not in order of importance, but all considerations that must be taken into account. Great. Therefore, my question follows from that, and it relates to the geothermal, the absence of geothermal. Is it possible to work up some ideas about the sustaining of productivity of the various systems that you manage over those 30 years, with the possibilities of innovations to do with geothermal and so on? So the key issue is productivity, question mark.
Yeah, Councillor McPherson, I think, this is a very valid point, and I think probably we can have a lot of debate, discussion about it. But yes, I think it's very important, especially within an environment where we know the situation is quite clear. We do have an infrastructure that is aging. We do have infrastructure that increasingly is required to meet increasing and emerging new standards and expectations. We live in an environment where affordability becomes a significant issue in our community, and therefore productivity and efficiency have to be critical parts of our everyday thinking. Are we doing the right thing? Are we achieving the most we can with the limited resources we've got. And I think the simple answer is absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you for the questions this morning, councillors. We do have, it has been moved by Councillor Donaldson. Is that correct, Councillor Donaldson?
Yes, move and a very short comment.
Oh, well, thank you for the short comment. Yes.
If I can go, well, I'm happy to move this 30-year infrastructure strategy, which is a legislative requirement, but I think it addresses our environment and likely environmental standards, resilience, and also enables our economy to flourish. So on that basis, I think it's a great plan. I'd just like to address the issue of geothermal
Well, I think I do actually then need a seconder for this.
Second.
Thank you, Councillor McPherson. Thank you. Thank you.
So as it's been raised, Madam Chair, and I sit on the joint working party with Regional Council with Councillor Bentley, the draft Rotorua geothermal plan identifies electricity generation as the lowest priority use for the Rotorua geothermal field. There are higher considerations from a community and a cultural perspective for the use of and preservation of that field. So there will be a presentation coming to your committee, Madam Chair, by the Geothermal Working Party where that can be further addressed. But just with those few words, I'm happy to move.
Thank you. It has been moved and seconded. I will have to ask again if there's anyone who would like to make a quick comment, just because of... No? Thank you very much. Thank you. So I'm now going to put that motion that the committee approve the 30-year infrastructure strategy 2021 to 2051 for the inclusion into the 2021 long-term plan consultation process. It's been moved and seconded. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary? Thank you. Carried. Thank you. Now, councillors, I would like to ask your indulgence to bring the draft Rotorua Community Safety Plan onto the agenda now, and I'm moving the and just putting back the 2021 representation review process, just moving that back one, because we do have people here to speak to this community draft, the draft Rotorua Community Safety Plan. Thank you. So do come up, Rosemary. So we've got a report, the draft community safety plan that be received. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Yates, and thank you, Councillor Tapsell. So it's been moved and seconded that the report draft community safety plan be received. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you. Contrary? Thank you. Thank you, Jocelyn. I understand that you're giving an overview and you've got our guests with you this morning. Kia ora tātou. Nice to have you with us this morning, and you'll do the introductions. Jocelyn, thank you.
Ai, tēnā tātou e hui hui mai nei tēnei ata. Just wanted to take the opportunity firstly to introduce the guests that we've brought along with us this morning. So we have Phil Taikato here from the police, our area commander, and we also have Tim Russell attending, who is helping us out to do some work. Tim is a international security specialist who works overseas and has some business overseas assisting people with their security needs, and he is also just working with us at the moment to help us in the development of our community safety planning as we go forward. So I wanted to take the opportunity to introduce them both to you all. I also wanted to take the opportunity to thank our councillors for their leadership in this community safety plan as we've brought it forward, and I'm really pleased to be here this morning to introduce and to talk through our community safety plan, which we're hoping to take out for community consultation when we go to community consultation for the long-term plan.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you, Phil, and thank you, Tim, for coming along this morning to be with us. Thank you.
Bye. So we have a very quick presentation to work through this morning. I just wanted to start off by saying how important community safety is And we're really, really happy to be here and pleased to be able to present it as a priority within our long-term plan, because community safety has such far-reaching consequences for us all. While I don't want to dwell on negative statistics, we do have to look at the statistics in Rotorua in terms of the high crime victimisation rate. We pull our statistics from .lovesdata.com, and where they do comparisons across all of our different territorial authorities, of which there are 66, and we rate number 66 in terms of the level of crime victimisation in New Zealand. So we know that our residents and visitors anecdotally are telling us that they do not feel safe in Rotorua, and this is a huge issue that's been brought forward to us by our councillors and our community. So councillors, as you've brought this forward, you've indicated to our organisation that you would like to see a coordinated response, and for us to think around what we can do to improve safety in our community for both the community and the visitors who come here.
So this has been a first of a couple of reports, isn't it then?
Yes.
Because we did talk about the emergency housing and what that might look like and what we can do there, and the other one I think was around our long-term planning. So is this the start of a few things?
Right. Yes, so this is one part of our Homes and Thriving Communities strategic framework.
That's right.
These are just some of the headlines that have come forward and the concerns that are being raised regularly within our community, both with you all as councillors, both with us as officers. And so we wanted to make sure that we prioritise it within the LTP, and we have actually workshopped this with you all as councillors. And so the plan that we're presenting today is built off the workshops that we've had, the couple of workshops that we've had with you all. During 2020, just in terms of our time frame, we developed He Papakainga, He Hapori Tauri Kura, our Homes and Thriving Communities framework. That included a lot of community consultation. It was a partnership that we did with Te Arawa, and we made sure that we talked to organisations, businesses and our communities as we built that. Community safety was a consistent theme that came through that, and so we have identified it as a work stream last year. Then towards the end of the year, we had further concerns being raised with us, and in particular about issues within our inner city, as well as, which you'll all be well familiar with, as well as along Fenton Street, which has developed as the emergency housing has occurred there. Then we moved into, this draft plan will be part of our community consultation that will start hopefully towards the end of this month and be ongoing throughout next month. As part of the LTP, we'll be looking for our community feedback on the investment that we're looking to make in this area. And then we'll be ready to launch it by July when the LTP becomes active. So as a priority, towards the end of last year, we had the feedback from our community. So we increased Guardian patrols and mobile. We had mobile patrols set up to ensure that we had good coverage across our city. We extended the monitoring of our CCTV to include longer hours throughout the summertime. We put in place the temporary alcohol ban, or you put in place the temporary alcohol ban last month in response to community feedback, and we've developed this plan. So those are the actions, the priority actions that we've taken. I'll just say up front that our vision is an aspirational vision. We're not trying to just be better than number 66. We want to be the safest place to live and raise a family. We don't think that's impossible. We know there's some work to do, but we've got good partners like our police colleagues who we've had a long working relationship with, and who we will continue to work with alongside our government partners, but more importantly, bringing on board our community and working with our communities to raise safety and to ensure that safety is a priority for us all. An important plank, of course, is our collaboration, but we really do want to make sure that as we have, we want to focus on our children and young people, and we want to develop that effective collaboration with the police and the community groups that we know are so important to ensuring that this plan is a success. So, we've got, sorry, I do have a handout, but we'll hand that out for you all to take away with you. It's the entire plan on an A3, which is in your minutes and will also, in your agenda, and will also be coming out as part of the consultation document. This is what the community plan looks like. We know that we've broken it down into intelligence, response, prevention and collaboration. So we want to make sure that we're doing all the things possible to make sure that just simple things like in our open space areas, we can go through and make sure that we have good crime prevention through environmental design. That's things like making sure that if we're planting trees, we're not planting them directly in front of CCTV cameras so that in the years to come, you can't see anything. We want to make sure that we take, and we're looking at extending our CCTV camera network to ensure that our public spaces are safe. We're looking at addressing environmental design, expanding and enhancing the guardians, and looking at working alongside our communities to develop community safety plans, and even having discussions with them around the patrols that are currently taking place. I don't want to read word for word through the plan, and I know that you've all seen it within the current agenda and the papers that you've received. I'm also aware that we're going to take this out and have much sort of bigger consultation with our communities as it goes out. And so what I wanted to do is move to our next steps and just say, we've got our community consultation ready to go through the LTP. We're costing and developing a detailed implementation plan, and we're looking forward to taking this out to the community. And thank you again for your support of this and for the advice that you've given us as we've built it. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jocelyn. And yes, that to most of the councillors who've attended the various workshops that we've had, a lot of this is actually a result of what we were giving a steer to you and Jocelyn, and putting some actions that we thought would help us address some of those issues that we were concerned about and that were coming to us as councillors. So thank you for this, and also the fact that it is one of a number of reports that are going to come to us. I think this is the first, so thank you for that. So councillors, I'm happy if you'd like to ask some questions. I'm sure you will have. Councillor, Mr. Berryman Kemp.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Look, thank you for your plan. Which is great, and which we obviously need. So I'm comfortable with that. But my one question when I go through is, how do we ensure that the interventions are in place to address the core determinants of the behaviour you're trying to address? When I go through the plan, it reads to me more about managing the issue, managing the symptom, less about addressing the determinants or addressing the cause. So what's the connectivity, what's the link with actually addressing why we're getting the behaviour as opposed to just managing the behaviour?
Hilda, one of the observations that we would make is that the issues that we're currently facing are not issues that have grown up overnight. They're not things that are easy to fix. They're not things that we're going to be able to just walk out and shoot a silver bullet and everything will be fabulous. What we're really wanting to make sure, though, is that the approach we take is really based in partnership with, but not just with our government department colleagues, also with our communities. It's really, really important that everyone takes responsibility for a better outcome in terms of community safety. So there are issues like emergency housing, and we're looking into those, working with our agency partners. Our government departments are well aware and understand that there are a lot of issues in terms of social issues for our community, but we're also really aware that we need to work together. We can't work in a siloed approach. So what we want to do is take a coordinated response and with your leadership, with our councillors' leadership, really take an approach where we take that leadership approach and we try and coordinate the responses to ensure that they're fit for purpose for our community, for our tamariki, and for the future of the people who live here in Rotorua.
Thank you, and I think it's important to note also that the 4 wellbeings have only recently come back on the agenda. We never took them off, and we did the best that we can, but I think that's important to remember. Thank you. Ms. Marks, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A bit of 2 questions yet again. This is kind of a two-fold, and this is something that I kind of spoke to when I submitted on the LTP. At what level of participation will health professionals be involved with City Guardians? Because I'm just well aware that some people may be scared of police intervention. And then part 2 of it, how do you guarantee safety with the likes of the police being involved in this when there has been lots of reports coming out about racial profiling, especially with rangatahi Maori in Auckland, and just wanting to make sure that our rangatahi are safe and don't become victims of surveillance being utilised for any other methods rather than just safety and that racial profiling aspect. Thank you.
Kia ora to your question. It's not one that we normally hear, the frank putting of a question such as that. Kia ora.
Do you like me to?
Oh, yes, you can. Yes, certainly, Jeff, if you've got him.
If I can just add to a couple of comments that Jocelyn's already made. I think what you're seeing here is not the complete plan. What you're seeing here, quite rightly, as Mr. Berryman-Camp pointed out, the reactive elements of a much broader strategy. The broader strategy does include what do we do about housing? What do we do about emergency housing? How do we actually develop a pathway for people that have got multiple complex needs that incorporates a much more wraparound service encompassing the health services that are required for those individuals? At the same time, we're also very aware that our neighbourhoods and our communities need to be places where people can thrive. And so with the development or identification of our plans for the Eastern Wellness Plan, for example, the West Plan for Nongataha, the goal there is to actually develop a very much an inclusive community development approach, which actually looks to address those determinants that I think were actually alluded to previously. But we've got to have all of these parts in play, and without any of them, we won't have a comprehensive strategy. So what you're seeing today is very much the first element off the ground that we've actually been working in to try and say, how do we get some fast, immediate effect on our streets to make people feel that when they go for a walk, when they take their dog for a walk, when they wish to go out in the evening for a stroll, that they do feel safe, that they can be confident in that. So this is the first element that I think we're looking at. The other aspect that I'd point to is that I think we're incredibly lucky in Rotorua with the nature of the partnerships that we have. I think if you look at our local police response, if you look at Maori wardens, the community guardians that are in place and the various other elements of that, what we've got is recognition, I think, that this is not a strategy or not an issue that resides with one group of people. It's actually all of us who actually need to take responsibility. And I think, and Jocelyn has sort of already alluded to in the plan is actually built on that collaborative approach. So this is not a policing issue, it's not a council guardians issue alone, it's actually an all of community approach, which is designed to bring about a much more comprehensive approach than what we've actually seen before.
If you want to add anything, you'll be fine.
Yeah, I guess the only, just to double down on Jeff's comments, we really do want to bring to bear the resources that we have to ensure that they are coordinated, and then work with our government partners and our community partners to ensure that there is a wraparound, holistic approach as opposed to just us all working in our areas doing whatever we can. And we do fully recognise this is not something we can do on our own. So, and we shouldn't do it on our own. We've got to bring our communities with us. I did want to invite Phil to make some comments if he had, with respect to the second part of your question.
Yeah, tēnā anō tātou, katoa, nā mihi ki a koutou, I kua hui mai nei, I tēnei whare, I tēnei wā, tēnā koutou. Excuse my ignorance, Kim, are you a councillor or? Yeah, I want to just respond to you, Kim, in regards to your question to Jocelyn. Beside what Jocelyn has presented, you've got to be mindful there are a number of other threads of work being done at this stage around family harm, working with our gangs and working with our youth. That will thread into this prevention strategy. And we could, actually I could talk on in terms of the family harm approach. It's really, when you look at family harm, family violence, it's the foundation of virtually all of our criminal offending we're dealing with. And Rotorua is leading the country in terms of new initiatives with with the long-term strategy of curbing that. And Ms. Marks, in regards to your comment around our youth, here in Rotorua, in the police, what we've agreed on is arrest is the exception, supported resolutions is the norm. What I mean by that now, we've got iwi panels running successfully at Taharangi Marae. We run them once a week. We're going to be lifting that up. There's going to be iwi panels for youth. There's going to be iwi panels for our family harm episodes. And we're leading this in the country.
Thank you. Councillor Yates and then Councillor Donaldson.
Kia ora, through you, Madam Chair. I do have a question, but I'd also like to just note that I'd like to move the recommendation as well.
Thank you.
So my question is around, given that we are talking about safety here, and one of my primary concerns are the amount of children that are currently in emergency housing, and whilst that's another kaupapa too, it is still relative. Can you give me an indication of what figures we might have here at Council on how many children are in emergency housing?
Our understanding was that at the end of February there were around 374 children living in emergency housing in Rotorua. Now obviously that's not a figure that anyone should be comfortable with, and we certainly do not want our children and babies growing up in hotels.
Thank you. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I can signal, I'm happy to second the resolution to take this draft community safety plan forward as well. And there's sort of an implied question, but I guess a bit of a statement, and what I propose to say is, in my view, bearing in mind the questions that have all been asked, this is one part of the puzzle, and as the Chief Executive has explained, it's taken in the context that we also have a Housing and Thriving Communities plan, a child equity strategy, and those wellness plans for Eastern and Western. So, Madam Chair, I agree with my colleague Councillor Yates, is that motels are not a healthy environment for over 350 children to be raised in short, medium or long term. And there was a headline up there in Jocelyn's presentation that motels have been overrun by beneficiaries. Actually, those motels have accepted. None of them were forced to take those clients. So motels have accepted that. So we now have this situation of a number of families and 370-osh children concentrated in one area where they didn't used to be pre-COVID. And Madam Chair, nor is the CBD a good concentration point for emergency housing because we saw those problems pre-COVID. So this plan is about a partnership approach with other agencies, there is a cost involved, and that's factored into the LTP. So, you know, I'm more than happy to, but I'd appreciate your comments, Jocelyn, on this is just one aspect of a coordinated approach to community wellness right across the community.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Councillor Kumar, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess sometimes statistics tell you a grim story, but in reality it's a little different. And when you walk around Rotorua, you suddenly don't feel unsafe. Particularly in a lot of good suburbs, you feel like you still in God's zone, and it's a wonderful place, you know. Kudos to the police, to the Maori wardens, and extra security there is. But it is the nature of the world we live in at the moment, and sometimes we always cry out for extra policing and extra help. I believe Rotorua, as it shows some of the stats there are, some of it is, and it's not discriminatory, my comment, but it is generational. Those crimes that are being committed are by the same people, same groups. There are wonderful families in Rotorua, wonderful families who want to get on, but there are some families that are always going to be putting pressure on the rest of the infrastructure. Then we have behind the scenes crimes. You know, we have gang influences, very heavily gang influences, but we've also got groups that are trying now to sort of get them together. So I don't know whether SIPTED is going to be the solution, because we have areas like Ford Block, and I'm once again not discriminating, but we've had always heavy influences of violence from those areas, from the Kautus and from the east sides as well. But we are trying to change, and I hope that SIPTED, particularly in those areas, are going to help. So my question is, we didn't have homelessness before, and it is now more discriminatory to use that word, and it's more short term. How are those those homelessness adding to, because these stats that we've got are up till probably last year, 2020, and now with the growing influence of short term coming in Rotorua, are we factoring that into how we can make Rotorua a better place?
So I would say that with COVID and the use of emergency housing and the use of our motels for emergency housing, that did see a number of people both come off the street and move into emergency housing, as well as in some instances come away from cars and other places where they may have been living. So what we've noticed, just anecdotally on the street, is that there are less people living on the street now than what there were the same time a year ago, for example. But what I would go back to is that, yes, there are generational issues, but we are determined to work with our communities. So while you mentioned differing communities, we're really keen to get into those communities and work with them on the answers and solutions that they will come up with, to ensure that we've got a plan that everyone wants to buy into and be a part of. That's how we're gonna lift this place, and we will continue to work with our government colleagues. They're really, really keen to work with us, and this is part of a bigger plan. So this isn't just this community safety plan. This is one part of the larger Housing and Thriving Communities strategic framework that we have, which looks to address a number of other areas, housing being one of the biggest areas that we're looking at. So I hope that.
Thank you. Councillor Maxwell.
Kia ora, thanks for the presentation. Tēnā koe Piripi. This is a question that I thought of. I saw on television early this morning where Australia, again abandoning their responsibilities, are sending a plane load of, they put it,
501.
Kiwis who have been naughty over in Australia. They're sending them over here. The question is, will the New Zealand police be keeping a bit of a monitoring brief as to what parts of New Zealand they'll be going? Because I guess we're a desirable place for some people to come to in winter. Thank you, Pete.
So we have systems in place where we know who's coming in and where they're going, and monitoring systems that are currently there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McPherson.
Very quick question. Thank you all. Timeline. What's your timeline? You're going to produce a plan and bring it back to us?
So the plan is in the agenda that that you've got in your books. The plan is to take this plan out into our LTP consultation round, which starts at the end of this month, and it'll be available to get feedback, and we'll go into the community and have kōrero with our community around this and seek advice and support. Once it comes, and then it will all come back to council to be approved as part of the LTP by by the end of June, and be adopted from July the 1st this year.
Thank you, Chair. Happy to second.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the questions, councillors. I just want to add a few points. First of all, we do need to remember that when COVID came in and struck last year, then the homeless and the rough sleepers were put into motels to get them off the streets. What we have now is a situation where our motels are being used to mop up the housing crisis in Rotorua. And that has contributed to what we've got, the behaviours that we see on the streets. MSD, goodness knows how they assess who's going into the motels and monitors them. And so that has caused significant interest. While we've got a plan here, which I'm so pleased we have, and thank you for the mahi that you put in, Joss, you and your team, we've got a plan that's trying to address the safety of our community. But we've got people who are in motels who are just surviving in survival mode. Who's looking after their high and complex needs? How did that happen? We've got mothers with children living beside someone who's just been released from overseas, come back to New Zealand, a 501. We've got other people who've got gang relations waltzing in and out of those motels. So, you know, there are people in Rotorua who really need to have a good look at what they've contributed to the issues that are going down right now in our city. So we've got, you know, 400, nearly 400, I suspect the number of children going to school. Actually, many of them don't. Ask the truancy officers. Going to school from motels, that should not be happening. And the mental health of those mothers in the motels. So this is a big issue. It's not going to go away overnight, and at least this is a start. But the poor didn't invent the social welfare system that is actually now contributing to what we've got here. So we don't have those conversations with some of these government agencies that have actually taken the road of least resistance, and then we wonder why we've got people with the behaviours that they have on our streets today. And the police doing their best. I've never seen the police so often down my street as I do now, because I've got a backpackers just down from me, and these people are just wandering the streets aimlessly because they know they're not wanted. They know if we're out of sight, great, and that's wrong. So what's their daily activity? Wandering around the streets. So I want to thank you for your presentation this morning, Jocelyn, and for coming along. But this is a big issue. It's not going to go away overnight. But we need to not point the finger, but we need to do something constructive. And this plan goes a long way to helping us do that. So thank you very much. Thank you. It's been moved and seconded that the committee recommends to council that the Rotorua Draft Community Safety Plan be approved for public engagement. It's been moved and seconded. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Thank you. Carried. Thank you. I think... Yes, Councillor Wing.
Thank Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just, sorry, we were wanting to say a few words.
Oh, you didn't, in relation to this?
It relates to
Oh,
it.
okay, fine, thank you. You didn't want to have it with staff, with our presenters here?
No.
Did I miss you, or did I miss your hand
No, I
up?
thought we had a period to debate.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, well, yes, if you want to comment, yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, this is a really important, a really important subject, and I'd just again like to thank all the work that's been that has gone into the safety plan, and thank the police, thank everyone for keeping us safe and actually having a plan going forward. I don't want to take the focus away from this because this is a really important conversation that we're having, but unfortunately. It's come to light that 2 days ago, Councillor McPherson made a statement on social media, and I'll quote some of it. The controversy around Rotorua Lakes Council busing homeless people in from other centres was brushed aside as a non-urgent issue at the 25th of February 2021 meeting. That is untrue. That is misinformation. And actually, I'd like to say that please, instead of making a statement, please attend the workshops where we can contribute, to the conversation and we can contribute to the plan. That is where we can have our voice heard and have our input into this critically important plan for our district and our community. So again, I'd just like to say thank you to everyone who has contributed to this plan, and I would like to ask Councillor McPherson to retract this statement, this misleading statement, which is a lie, and it also taints our reputation as an organisation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and well, certainly we don't bus people in from out of town to come into housing in Rotorua. We just don't have the housing, and that's not council's job. So I don't read social media. I don't go on social media. I wouldn't know how to go on social media. So I didn't see that, but I'm sorry that that has appeared, because that is an untruth. That is not true. We don't do that. We don't do that, and I'm sorry to think that a councillor would say that. So yes, Councillor McPherson.
My response is very simple, straightforward. The social media expression at that time took question and answer verbatim from the video record of this last council meeting on the 27th of February. So there's no need to apologise for a verbatim statement that were made by two people. Thank you.
Well, I'm sure I was present at that meeting, but well, we certainly don't. Let me get it quite clear that we do not bus people into town from out of town for housing. If there's somebody else doing that, there may be, but I'd like to think that that doesn't even happen anyway. We've got enough people who are seeking accommodation, either emergency accommodation or relief accommodation at this point in time, that we don't need to bring anybody into town. And certainly that would not be council. Sorry, but does somebody else want to add anything? Otherwise, yes, Councillor Yates.
Kia ora, and through you, Madam Chair, I was just wondering if I could actually speak to moving the recommendation at all, if that's possible.
We don't have a recommendation.
Oh, previously I was the first to move it, and usually that's given as an option, but that's fine if not.
Thank you. Yes, please. Yes, you go ahead, Councillor.
Kapai, thank you. And ki te whai ake I tērā o ngā koro tāwhisha. This particular kaupapa is near and dear to us. Why? Because it's been brought to our table many a time under the guise of homelessness. So community safety is paramount for the sake of our children, as was indicated by Jocelyn in identifying 374. I sit on two Rotorua high school boards here, of which one has already indicated that we have 40 attending, and on Girls High Board would be equally the same. So this is critical for us, especially given that we all know the long-term effects of our tamariki mokopuna living in these environments, especially within an emergency housing situation. Mokopuna decisions needs to be at the forefront. It's a complex situation that requires robust facilitation and a coordinated a response, as Jocelyn mentioned, to effectively deal with safety, which some of us have brought to the table, once again under the guise of homelessness. He papa kāinga, he hāpori tauri kura. The draft plan, Jocelyn, is excellent, so credit to you and the team who've worked really, really hard. It couldn't come soon enough and bring on the long-term plan. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Yates, and I do apologise. I was remiss because when we finished the question session, then I should have been, although it had been moved and seconded, I should have allowed for discussion. So I apologise also to Councillor Wang as well. Thank you very much. So thank you. I think we've got one other item perhaps before lunch. We'd like to take that, which is the representation review process. So that the report 2021 representation review process be received. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Tapsell. Thank you, Councillor Wang. It's been moved and second, and I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, thank you, carried. So who's present? Oh, you're doing it from there, that's right. It's just, thank you. Some of us have heard it before. Thank you.
Good afternoon, councillors. I am going to take this report as read. There is no discussion required of you today, but this paper brings in front of you the process that is now ahead of us in terms of the representation review for 2021. There are just a couple of things that I would like to highlight, is that a representation review is required every 6 years. Our last review was undertaken in 2015, so we are now in that time for a representation review process. I think it's quite good to actually sort of state what is a representation review, and it is an opportunity to have a look at the DNA or the leadership makeup of the council, and it's an opportunity to engage with the community around identified communities of interest and whether those communities of interest are being represented appropriately around the table. In addition to the representation review or representation arrangements, there is also a requirement for council to consider the electoral system and the establishment of Maori wards. In terms of the electoral system, this council have already committed to first past the post for the 2022 elections. That decision was made in August 2017 when we had a by-election, and as a result a decision was required then for what the electoral system for the 2019 and 22 elections would be. So that one is done and then doesn't require any further discussion for us going forward into 2022. In terms of the Maori wards, you are all aware that discussion is underway around this. There was a briefing to elected members last week, and further discussion is ongoing around that. If a decision is required, or if a decision around the establishment of Maori wards, that will be brought forward to council to ratify that decision, and that is required by May this year in order for it to be part of the 2022 elections. So just reiterating again today, this paper isn't seeking a decision from yourselves today. It is just laying out the process going forward and sets out some key dates and I suppose definitions around what a representation review is all about, and also sets out a bit of a process for how we will undertake that review. So I'm happy to take any questions on the paper. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Una, just in respect of the decision on first past the post, just clarification around that. If so, you either have first past the post or STV for all mayor, council, and boards, community boards. You can't have a mix of. Is that my correct understanding?
That's correct. Yes.
So that's why that decision for the by-election set it in place right across those three categories.
That's correct, yes.
Councillor McPherson.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. If this representation review does agree to make changes, they would first take, except in the case of Maori wards, the other changes would take effect 3 years after 2022.
No. The process that will go through will mean that if there are changes to representation, they will be changes for the 2022 election.
A very important point. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Well, thank you. Yes, the process is very clear. Thank you. Yes, Councillor Mr. Berryman-Kemp.
Yes, apologies, and just seeking clarification because I seem to be having a wee bit of a mind blank here. The decision by May 21 is to proceed with the review?
No, sorry, just to clarify, so we have to undertake a representation review. We don't have any option in that. Our 6 years since our last review is coming up. Prior to how our representation review may unfold is dependent on a decision as to whether Maori wards is established or not. And in order to look at Maori wards and then how representation may look if they were introduced, and if you wanted that in place by the 2022 elections, we have to have a decision to establish Maori wards, and that needs to be made by May.
But thank you for that, and that's clear. Supplemental to that, when I look at 4.1 of the paper, and this may just be my comprehension, so I'm happy for you to lay that out. It looks as if the representation review actually outlines a whole pile of things. I get that the decision on voting process has already been made, so that's removed out. But so am I right in thinking by the 21st of May a decision has to be made on all of those factors, or only Maori wards? And I guess the lead on for that is why in particular the Maori wards decision by 21 May?
So no, the listed items in 4.1 will be worked upon after any decision on Maori wards. So we need a decision on either establishing Maori wards or not, and that has to be done by May. If Council chose to establish Maori wards, you would then fold that into all the other requirements of a representation review to make the whole package work. You can then, if no decision or no one further discussion on Maori wards comes forward by May, then the processes outlined in 4.1 continue, but there would be no further consideration of Maori wards for the 2022 elections.
Thank you for your clarification, because I've got that clear now, and that's triggered some of the things from the session that we had, so I understand how that works through now, so thank you.
Thank you. Oh, yes, Councillor Maxwell?
Yeah, so, Una, my understanding, would it be correct, is really by the 21st of May, things like this, it really is an opportunity to consider. Would that be right?
Yes.
I mean, if we choose to just remain status quo, that can be so.
Yes.
There's just an opportunity to consider.
Yes.
Ms. Marks?
Thank you. This is probably a bit far-fetched right now for it, but within the review will there also be the, knowing that we've already figured out everything for the next election, but will there also be the ability to bring up STV as a voting preference for future things, just because I understand that this only comes up every 6 years?
Sorry, I didn't quite hear your last bit.
Oh, sorry. So because of the fact that this is a 6-year review, and knowing that in 2022 we've already decided, well, Council has already decided that FPP will be our choice of voting, will there be a point in the review where we can put STB back on the table for future elections, not for 2022?
So yes, the way the cycle works is that there will have to be a discussion around, again, the option of first past the post or single transferable vote. That decision will be required in order that you have an electoral system for the 2025 election and then the subsequent one after that. So whenever we do that review, you're always looking 2 election cycles out in terms of what electoral system you're going to use. In saying that though, if there is a by-election as a result of a vacancy or the likes, that then also triggers the requirement to then review the electoral system being used.
Thank you. Mr Thomas, and then Councillor Kaifong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I don't really have a question. It seems pretty straightforward and well laid out. Thank you very much. And the few tricky points have already been asked, but I just wanted to indicate that I'm happy to move the resolution when the time comes.
Thank you. Councillor Kaifong, then Mrs Trumper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a bit more clarity about what is the process for us to decide before 21 May? So will there be I know we've had a workshop, but are we waiting for a recommendation from, say, for example, from Te Tato Board or community consultation, or how do we get
Are you saying what would trigger some interest in
yeah,
Maori
so how do
wards?
we get the
Well, we certainly
process?
don't go out and drum it up.
Yeah, how do we reach the position as to...
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm not
So
making it clear.
I can't speak on behalf of Te Tato nor Te Arawa, but my understanding is that the Te Tato Board are having some further and ongoing discussions about what the introduction of Maori wards may mean for them. And at this point, they are having the time to do that, and then there will be further ongoing decisions and conversations before we look at bringing a paper back here to Council.
So that means it would need to be in the SPNF for the April meeting for decision?
Not necessarily. I think we need to give due time for this, and saying that because of our committee cycle being April, that would be quite unfair in terms of a short time frame. There are options of an extraordinary council meeting closer to the deadline of the 21st of May to in order that those conversations have been allowed to be held.
And I think we also need to be clear that Maori wards are not the prerogative of Te Arawa.
No, it's just simply the question around how we get the process.
There might be a real groundswell out there in our community that I'm not aware of to say that we would like to have Maori wards. But from you others might have a better idea. But so, while Te Tato of Te Arawa would like to put a view, I'm sure, but it is not, Maori wards are not just the exclusive domain of Te Arawa. So we need to be clear about that.
Sorry, I was just wanting to clarify what the process was to bring this back for council for consideration or not.
Thank you. Mrs Trumper, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's just really a point of clarification really around the establishment of wards separate to Māori wards. So what information or when would information be available to the community boards if they were interested in taking it out to their communities regarding wards or the commencement of a ward?
That is part of the review process. Part of the review process will include a number of forums to go through the very complicated calculations that are required to consider wards or at large and the likes of community boards and such. We will also, so there will be part of that process will be a pre-engagement or awareness campaign where there's an opportunity to discuss with our community what it is to be represented around this table and what that could look like. all of that feedback is collected, and the council will then from that work up a proposal. That proposal then has to be adopted by council to go out and consult on. It's quite a lengthy process, and what we're suggesting this time round is the past review we had a working party, and they did all of the work in terms of pre-engagement to work on a proposal. We are suggesting this time that that pre-engagement is actually done by the entire council here. So running a number of forums and doing the pre-engagement that way.
Thank you. Councillor Maxwell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Last evening I was on a Zoom call with Maruata, which is all the Maori councillors throughout New Zealand, and there was good discussion on the Maori wards area, and Minister Nanaya came onto the call in that as well, and she expressed that it's an opportunity for some areas that have had to go through a horrible 5% nonsense that's been up till now. But she did indicate there are unique situations like in Auckland with the Maori, and then Bay of Plenty Regional Council with their own, and also mentioned about the unique position we're in here in Te Arawa with Te Tātou. So it's being also looked at by other communities around the country. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, as to what suits them best. Thank you. Mr. Berryman Kemp, and that's probably going to conclude this part of the. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So just to clarify, I think some of the issues that Councillor Kaifong raised up, Te Tātou are actually having the first Māori ward-focused workshop tomorrow. So everyone really mindful of the timeframes and the sequencing that needs to be in place. So I appreciate that the need to ensure that we're able to have those discussions to be able to feed into the council decision-making process.
Thank you. I just want to mention that, I mean, I think on the last one there were 3 councillors on the review, myself, Councillor Tapsell, Councillor Stewart, and then there were 2 from our community. 3 from the community, that's right. And so, and I know that it's the Mayor's prerogative to put on there who she wants. So if you want to go on to that review committee, I would suggest that you speak to the Mayor. Yes.
Just to clarify that.
Okay. Because it's so interesting.
Yep. There isn't going to be a review committee this time. You are all going to be that.
Okay, well that's good too, because that's so interesting. But when you hear from various community groups, etc., that's really interesting. I did hear you say that before too. Thank you. It has been moved and seconded, is that right?
It's been moved.
Moved and seconded. Thank you, Mrs. Trumper. Now, are there any further points? Carl, then I'll put that the committee recommends that council note the 2021 representation review process along with the key dates. It's been moved and seconded. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, thank you. Carried. Thank you. Now we do. I have to take. Excuse me. So we're just going. Thank you. Look, I am going to ask that we move into public excluded. We do have one, the Economic Recovery Project 4. It's just one project to be considered. So I would, and because of commercial sensitivity at this point, that's on our public excluded agenda. So we'll take that, and then we can go into take a recess and have lunch, and be back here by 1, so that we don't have to resume again after the hearings. Yes, Councillor Yates.
I was just wondering, do we have a public hearing at 1?
Yes, we do have a hearing at 1. So if we can put this one out of the... Thank you. So could I please have a mover and a seconder that we go into public excluded? Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Thank you, Councillor McPherson. All those in favour, please.